I wouldn't call this my review of Project Hail Mary, but I'm going over my notes. I kind of passed out after the movie. And it was not hard to stay awake. It wasn't bad. It was very much like formulaic, if you ask me. Like every movie that I've seen recently, every space movie is basically borrowed heavily from 2001 Space Odyssey. And I question how good even that movie is. You know, we hear all these things about Kubrick, how he's this brilliant director and stuff. I think Eyes Wide Shut was incoherent. I thought it was crap. I mean, honestly, the amount of time people spend analyzing his movies, I mean, undoubtedly at the time, I'm sure they were a bigger deal. But I'm just saying, compared to what we have today, things have evolved. Standards have risen. And I'm looking at this new movie, again, it's called Project Hail Mary. And, you know, just to me, it just seems like the space travel, this movie, it was almost like a joke. Like B-movie stuff, like little objects floating in space. It actually looked rather cartoony and quirky. And space is kind of goofy. I mean, it's just so ludicrous to me that people in there actually believe it. And they think, oh, this is happening. This is progress. We're flying very far away. And the whole thing is obviously influenced by NASA aesthetics, which is probably why it's kind of cartoony. The guy's got a NASA logo, and a lot of the shots are reminiscent of what you see from the ISS. So what they're doing is they're showing you a movie version of what's, you know, supposed to be real looking. They don't make it look realer, which they could do. I mean, if you've seen the photos of the Earth from space, where it's like, take that, flat earthers, and you see the Earth down there, it's like, what? Earth is CGI? I mean, what have you actually proven here? That doesn't look real. Regardless of the shape, it looks computer generated. And why should the Earth, like, it looks real where I am here on the ground, where I can touch the dirt and the grass. But apparently, if I go up 300 miles, it's going to look like pixels and CGI. It's going to look phony. Like, I'm sorry, but things don't look faker the further away they get. It doesn't make sense. Unless the Kármán line is just where, you know, the boundary between our atmosphere and space, maybe that is the line where nothing above that can be or is accurately represented. Because I'm not saying they didn't send something up there. I mean, you saw Benny Johnson's jaw drop, like Soy Jack pointing at the thing. You know, I mocked him for that, and I posted a picture of that meme of Soy Jack pointing, gawking with his mouth wide open. And, you know, I ridiculed him for it, and I was getting a lot of traction, and he deleted the tweet. It's like, well, if you're going to put your mug on the camera screen with your mouth wide open while pointing at something behind you and act like it's not a ridiculous look, I mean, obviously that's not a real emotion. We've seen the astronauts do this. Like, you know, when Musk's rocket went up there and they sent those new astronauts up there, what did they all do? They looked out the window and they opened their mouths very wide. We called it the overjaw effect. Because the astronauts claim that when you see the Earth from space, you obtain the overview effect, where now you become cosmically conscious. Like, oh, we're all connected. One world, no countries. So this cosmic consciousness comes from being so elevated you can see God's eyes view of the Earth. Well, the way they represent that, because they never show you Earth, like this is what you never see. The illusion here isn't in what they show you, because it's a magic show. It's in what they don't show you that would reveal it. And so basically, he has them looking out the window with their mouths wide open, like it's some kind of awe-inspiring view, but they don't actually show you their view. King Ravana says 10 days shipping on the hat. Is that what they give you? I go through Printful. Sometimes it's faster. It depends. If I add something to the design, they have to add some stuff. They have to add a little charge, but usually I think it's about 5 to 7 days. Till says Trump promised a 2,000K tariff stimmy this summer. Yeah, it's not going to happen. How long has he been promising that? And wasn't he promising all of his Q morons that he was going to give them unlimited money? You know how many of these people were clamoring for this? It wasn't even a universal basic income. It was called Nisara. And then they had this myriad of Ponzi schemes to get involved in. So the whole Q group was just buying into a lot of S coins, shit coins, thinking that they were going to blow up, that there was going to be a great awakening. Nothing the guy ever promises does he deliver on. They don't recognize this. JFK never came back. Yeah, King Ravana, if you have a question about your orders, just email me or hit me up on Discord. I don't want to use too much of our live stream talk on third-party print-on-demand suppliers, but you saw the hat on the live streams. Like, it exists. It's corduroy. It's vintage. I have no problem with it. The one that you ordered, the new ones, all have a penguin on the side. But I don't want to promote products during the live streams. But if you want to talk about the hat, I guess we can. Let's see here. 322, been thinking about Mad Mike lately. Yeah, that's an interesting one too. The last interview with Mad Mike, he was talking to some guy named Rick Lotek. And he's like, what's going to happen because if a lot of people are brainwashed, like they don't get it. And the people who say it's fake are basically being low information on their take, which is fine. I could care less. But anyway, Till says, I don't think any of us would have guessed Trump would be the ultimate nothing burger president. No, I recognize it from the beginning. It's called future faking. It's a psychological manipulation tactic. He's a cult of personality figurehead, and they're using cult mind control tactics. MAGA is a cult. And the things that they promise is future faking. That's the hook that drags you in. But then they also have a secondary thing, which is the doomsday if they don't win. So it's doom and gloom, and then these utopian visions, and they present these things as parallel. And so it's like, if you're not motivated by fear and scarcity, maybe you can be motivated by greed. But he doesn't deliver on the greed, and the fear stuff isn't really a real thing either. But anyway, we were talking, about Mad Mike. On his last interview, here's what I was saying. We raised money for him. You can read it in the New Yorker. The article's called Looking for Life on Flat Earth. We financed his first rocket. He launched in the Mojave Desert, set a record, 1,875 feet. Independent rocket engineer. Probably the smartest person I've ever met. But I was his biographer. And so he wanted to do a biography in the way I write it. I'm a ghostwriter. Like, most of what I write, I don't publish under names that you would recognize, or I'm working with other people. And in his case, it was essentially about 15 or 20 back-to-back phone calls, recorded and transcribed, and then I put it into a context, and then he took his book out on his tour. But anyway, it was quoted in the New Yorker in a more recent article, April 2023, about misinformation. But in his last interview, he was about to go on a launch for the Science Channel. So they were like, all the people who say, he was trying to prove the Earth is flat and he died. It's like, well, actually, no. He was a daredevil. He was setting records as early as 2002 for his limousine jumps. So, like, there were people like, this guy just came out of nowhere. It's like, no, he didn't. He was on Jimmy Kimmel like 20 years before. But anyway, he had scored a gig with the Science Channel, and they were paying for him to do a launch to finish off season 1 of Homemade Astronauts. And it was on that launch, not the one they made the documentary about, but it's on that one where the parachutes did not deploy. Which, I have a theory on that one. But my point of it is, before the launch, he was interviewed, and they the interviewer asked him, what will happen if you follow through with this? Because the idea was a 5,000-foot launch at the end of the season, and then they would pay for the helium for him to get into the Raccoon, which uses a balloon to go above the stratosphere, and then the rocket goes from there. So it gets above the densest part of the atmosphere. Like, it's not a new thing. This has been done since like the 40s. So that was the plan. But before he launched, someone had asked him, well, what happens if you take the Raccoon, you're live streaming, and it's a 3-hour, because it's like 3 hours to go up there in the balloon before it even launches. And the idea is it would have been streamed the entire time. And the question was, well, what happens if you go up there and you don't see any discernible curve at the Kármán line? And he said, I don't know why I think this. I'm paraphrasing, but he said, they will shut everything down. I don't know how they're going to do it, but they will shut the whole world down. And I thought that was a really strange thing to say, because this was on the 20th of February of 2020. So it was like a couple days before his launch, but it was only a couple weeks before COVID, where everything was, in fact, locked down. But anyway, I thought that was interesting because it was inconceivable that they would be capable of locking the world down. So I thought it was a very peculiar thing to say. And then they did. But as far as what he would be doing now, I have no idea, because the plan was, had that first launch succeeded, he would have done the second one. And whatever the case, it would have been a daredevil stunt, obviously, on par with maybe, what's the guy's name who did the Red Bull jump, where they made it look like it was a planet, but it was just New Mexico, Felix Baumgarten or something like that. But he would have done the space jump. And personally, I don't know if it was survivable. I don't know. Like, I have serious doubts as to whether it is survivable. And I don't believe that the NASA astronauts are actually going into space. Like, there's a certain thing about, I don't know, it's just the speeds, there are other things. Like when Kate Perry went to space, did you see any evidence of G-forces? I mean, her face did not melt like it's supposed to. Their hair didn't float like it's supposed to, or didn't stick straight up like on the space station. But now, to get back to the movie, yeah, I mean, so anyway, what I'm saying is, like, I didn't think that was survivable. Just so you know, I don't think he would have lived through it. And I hate to be pessimistic, but you remember his first call, he said, when he asked if we would finance his rocket, he said if we put our billboard on the side, he had said he had a 30% chance of living. And I like that attitude. He didn't say, I've got a 70% chance of dying. But on the space one, I just don't know if it's even possible, because I don't think these things have been done. And if no astronauts have actually launched in these rockets, which isn't a far-flung claim, have there been any real manned rocket launches? Anyone? Like, whether or not you think they faked the moon landing, or whatever you think about the universe, or the Earth, or anything. And by the way, nobody knows the solar system is flat. I ask people all the time. It's like, they're like, ooh, the planets are aligning. It's like, what do you mean? They're on a plane. It's called the ecliptic plane. The planets are aligned. It's not like they're all scrambled around, going around the sun in some, spherical configuration. No, we have an ecliptic plane. All the planets exist on it, with the exception of the planet that's not really a planet, sometimes depends, Pluto, which is 17 degrees below, which makes sense anyway. It's the underworld, Pluto. Oh, but anyway, we did have plans. The plan was, after the launch, whatever it revealed, because honestly, it doesn't even matter. The fact of it is, if the Earth is anything other than a ball, would 75 miles be high enough to discern this? The answer is no. But you have a 3-hour live stream where you're doing something so audacious. It was going to be a recreation of Auguste Piccard. Like, there was a lot of potential in it. And it was going to be followed up by what was going to be his continued radio show, which he was really getting into that. And there's this bar in Apple Valley where I checked it out recently. I mean, it's by out in Mojave, where he had the back room. They turned it into his podcast studio. And I went and checked it out, and it's actually a shrine to him now. They have parts of the parachute, I believe, from his previous and successful launch. Someone had asked me, do you think they cut his parachute lines? And that's a valid question. Others have said, do you think it was faked? And I'm like, well, how is that possible? There's no scenario. Because you're talking about an open live event. It's not like it's a closed set. And if you look at the footage, there's no indicator that you could have faked. In other words, there's no way where he could have disappeared. But anyway, there was a lot of conjecture about that, obviously. And that was one of the things that revealed to me the distinction between the low information, incredulous person and the highly informed skeptic. And how the people with low information are often the most confident when it comes to expressing their views. Like, oh, I know for sure that Pete in Florida guy is definitely Jeffrey Epstein. And it's a reveal. They have to tell us. The new theory is there was a body double they killed, and the real Jeffrey Epstein is now this tennis player named Pete in Florida. And all these people are looking at this like, it's real, it's him. And I get chastised for saying it's not him. And the reason I say it's not him is that if you look at the videos, it doesn't even look like him or sound like him. Completely different face. But people have made up their minds off of limited information. Jorge says, no NASA trickery with Mad Mike. Well, he had talked to some people from JPL at this Adventures Club meeting. And he had actually heard from them that NASA were placing bets as to whether or not he would survive. That there were people watching. And they didn't say how, but apparently, and I thought this was creepy, they said that they had watched all of his attempts. And I'm like, that's weird. Like, where were they? And I was there before the August attempted launch. The temperature and the heater didn't get high enough. And the homemade astronaut show was there. The Science Channel was there. And you know what all of the Science Channel people were wearing? Which I thought was weird. Because all of them, I'm talking the producers, the camera crew, they were all wearing NASA shirts. I became very suspicious of them. And at one point, I walked across the field to talk to Mike. And I was going to say, hey, when they interview you, and I had some talking points. And while I was speaking to him, he pointed to his chest because he was mic'd. He's like, yeah. And the producer just basically walked in between us. And the entire time, they did not interview anybody from my group. Not me or anyone else. We were there. We financed the first rocket. They did not want to talk to us. But they had other people there who lined up, who were ready to be interviewed. And I thought, that's really interesting. But the guy that was doing security was very shady. The guy who was there that night guarding the rocket, Holbrook was his name. He had a channel and he had these really psychotic videos. But anyway, this person was in direct contact with one of our mutual enemies. Because it wasn't just me. The stalker that I'm following up on, MG, the guy who works at the White House, he was also stalking Mad Mike. That was one of the things we had in common. He had been creating clone websites to divert traffic, to sell fake merch just to throw Mike off. And another thing he would do is he would copyright claim Mike's videos as well. So Mike had a trending video on YouTube when he was interviewed by Tosh. It was like the number 3 video on YouTube. And as it was gaining significant traction, Goldfinch had it pulled down. So anyway, Goldfinch's guy was somehow doing security for Mad Mike's rocket, and I thought that was weird. And the night before that launch, some driver accidentally, in quotes, bumped into it and bent part of it, and he had to fix it. I'm not suggesting foul play. However, again, you're dealing with, I mean, look who was involved. If you look at the level of scrutiny the event got, it was a top trending Facebook. It was on the cover of 17 newspapers internationally. I mean, it got so much traffic, and we watched the immediate follow-up. And what was interesting is the entire flat earth cult wanted nothing to do with him because he wasn't a Christian. And then someone was saying, oh, he's not really a flat earther. It's like, well, who cares? How can you even claim that you are if you can't prove it? Like, nobody is technically. Like, I would say we're just earthers. If you haven't proven for yourself it's flat, you can't call yourself a flat earther. If you can't prove for yourself it's a globe, can you call yourself a globe earther? I mean, as far as you know, you're an earther, unless you've taken extraordinary steps to see the curve. Let's see here. Anonymous says, you've been live while I was wasting my time watching boring flat earth versus globe debates. Yeah, I don't watch those debates because the people who participate in these debates are often questionable anyway. And I don't think the question right now that's pertinent is the shape of the world. Honestly, it's the world view, which is far more significant. So I'd watched Project Hail Mary, and it had a couple of themes, but like I was saying earlier, somewhat cliche. But one of the common themes I've noticed, whether it be Moonfall or Project Hail Mary or many other movies, Armageddon, there's often a theme of sacrifice. So in this case, Ryan Gosling, that's his name? Isn't a Gosling a seal? Yeah, I think that's his name. The guy, I think he played Ken in Barbie. So he has this ridiculous role as like a third grade science teacher who gets picked to save the world. And that's always the case of these space movies too. So the science teacher, he's a microbiologist, and apparently there's some kind of alien that's causing the sun to go dim. Now in the book, the scientists decide to drop nukes in Antarctica. Oh, it's a baby goose. Well, anyway, they have to nuke Antarctica because they want to create the greenhouse effect in order to warm the earth, or trap the heat. All right, let me see if I can get my notes here. I take my notes in the dark. I saw a trailer for The Odyssey, Christopher Nolan. We've gone there. Spider-Man, which to me looks comic booky and honestly kind of dumb. Disclosure Day. That movie's coming out in July. And really, I feel like all this alien hype from the government is really just to hype up the movie. All right. Okay, so it starts off where he wakes up from a induced coma, and he's like 19 light years away, or 1.19 light years away. I mean, they're basically sending him off to this distant planet to find the cure for the sun. And he wakes up and he's in basically like a body bag that's being unzipped by a robot. And he's covered in some kind of gel, and he's basically like a Matrix pod, like Neo. And so the Matrix pod thing and crawling out of it like a worm really made me think of a cocoon. And there is this notion here, of course, of kind of a rebirth attached to it. His name is Grace, which might be significant because these movies, these space movies, I think are conveying what you could call religious pageantry. Sun flu, says Tomanoid. Yeah, basically the sun had space AIDS. Remember when they were saying that COVID came from space? It got dropped off by that green comment. Oh, we got space AIDS. So he has to save the sun. And there are words in the show like, like savior, saving the sun, which doesn't surprise me because that's one of the common things with these movies. And the big theme here is self-sacrifice. So the sacrificial sun savior thing, again, this is all, to me, if you ask me, this is ridiculous repackaging of more archetypal themes. But the thing is, the alien he meets with looks suspiciously similar to the alien that was hanging out with Adam Sandler. If you've seen Adam Sandler's movie Spaceman, it's kind of the same thing. It's someone who's completely isolated, cut off from the world, and then he's making friends with an alien. And that's what happens here. Although the alien in this one wasn't specifically a spider, it was basically a spider, but like more of a rocky substance, kind of like almost a crab-like. But anyway, the whole theme of it was man saves the world, meets friend in outer space. And I noticed when he asked the alien what the alien's love, because the alien had like a wife, his mate. He was asking the alien friend, what is your mate's name? But he didn't say, what is her name? He said, what is their name? So I was like, okay, very pronoun sensitive, which again, just suggests, I think, something here about how these movies, these space movies present this idea of a utopian thing, like across, you don't make assumptions about, I mean, this is basically like interspecies love here. They made multiple jokes, and the affection they were showing, kind of insinuating that he fell in love with this thing, and it was a different species even. So I don't think that was coincidental. In fact, he was trying to teach the alien to fist bump, and the alien kept saying to fist my bump. And it was an obvious joke, and it was repeated a couple of times, and I thought, that's really weird. I mean, honestly, I thought it was kind of awkward what they were kind of insinuating. But my point of it is, he was in love with this big spider alien thing. And that not only that, but once he sent the substance back to save our sun, he decides that instead of coming back to Earth, he's going to stay out there with his alien family and teach the alien children science. I mean, look, I'm just saying, it's ridiculous. It's self-sacrifice. I guess I don't know what to make of it. I mean, I can't say it's bad. Although personally, I think it's ludicrous. But if I believed in space, I would probably like it. I just think it's peculiar. And what I think is the strangest of all is that the people watching it just tacitly accept this all as real, inevitable, it's about to happen. But I was mostly interested in seeing it because the timing of it, being released at about the same time that we have these astronauts going to space during Easter weekend. So everyone's talking about this. And they made the point, one of the astronauts, he said, when we're on the far side of the moon, you're going to lose communication with us. And while you're there, I'd like it if all 8 billion of you would all pray and send us your love. And I was like, that's interesting. Because again, this thing's a big cult, and you're worshiping the resurrection god. The obelisk is a symbol. And so when it disappears, that is symbolic. The symbolic death before the resurrection, like the Masonic initiate in the coffin. So the idea here is the loss of contact, the period of darkness, and everyone's praying, is to be followed with the reemergence of the thing. And there's supposed to be some great, outpouring of joy. I mean, it's a big cult. Tom says, a bunch of Gosling movies, he has an artificial girlfriend of some kind, a doll, Barbie, a hologram. Oh, interesting. Jorge says Ishtar weekend. Ibreak says The Rock was practical effects with the use of CGI in some areas. I'm convinced that The Rock, side topic, but I'm convinced that The Rock was wearing a bodysuit from the day that he left the WWE. I think The Rock was always the rubber. And the reason why is that he was unsustainably large, bigger than he was when he was a wrestler. And I don't think that that was a physical state he could have maintained for that long without destroying his health. And so I think what he did was he became this guy in a muscle suit for years. And he used the excuse of losing weight for a role to get rid of it. And then people are saying, oh, he was using performance-enhancing drugs. Meanwhile, the entire time, he was wearing a bodysuit. And when he was being lauded as a great actor for having lost 60 pounds, you know what was on the cover of GQ? Glenn Reynolds wearing a muscle suit for a role as a football player. And I was like, did he borrow that from The Rock? That's weird. Just pointing out the fakeability of it all. Now, the point here I'm getting at with this movie really is that the concept of space is religious in nature. It's not about science. It's not achievable. It's about promoting a progressive global worldview. And the idea of aliens and falling in love with the aliens is actually tied into this. Because think about it. If you look at how the public looks at aliens, and this is within the political horseshoe model, the far left sees this thing as progressive. We should be interspeciesist or whatever. You should be able to try to have spider babies with the alien from a distant planet, if you meet them. Meanwhile, the right is like, these are demons. These are fallen angels. Don't trust the aliens. They're working with the government. They eat children. They're interdimensionals. They'll scratch Tucker Carlson's back. So why is it that there's this movie where this character falls in love with an alien while the political right is being agitated to fear the alien? So what is it? Do we fear them or do we them? What do we do with the aliens? Do we make love to them or do we make war with them? And I think this is fascinating because the right is anti-alien. That is, the right is conditioned to say, build the wall, stop the immigrants, they're pro-ICE. But they're also for Space Force, stop the aliens. Aliens are demons. And the left is like, open borders, invade us, please. Give us your tech. Anonymous says, The Rock was wearing a muscle suit theory is one of my favorites. Yeah, and I think it's defensible because we know it's fakeable. And when you look at The Rock's body in a number of these movies, it's a big exaggeration, if you ask me. Not that it's unachievable. And I remember watching videos where he's pretending like, I just eat a lot of oatmeal, gorilla-sized bowls. It's like, I don't think that's oatmeal. Like, obviously, these are some types of drugs. But then he doesn't have, like, the big... like a lot of these bodybuilders of that scale, that size, they look like pregnant monsters. Like, where's that big bloated gut thing? So he's not having any of the side effects. Sure, there's the baldness, but where's the back knee and the hair in weird places and the head? Certain aspects of the head that there are physiological changes that would be giveaways that I just don't see. And I'm thinking, well, maybe he's just wearing a suit. Like the actor who played Thor. You can find behind the scenes these Marvel hero movies where you can see how this is 100% achievable. And he wasn't wearing this while he was wrestling. Because I don't think that could be achievable. Anonymous says, have you seen Ludacris in his muscle suit in one of his rap videos from decades ago? I have not. I mean, these things aren't new. And this includes hands. Like, you can wear gloves. It's basically a realistic looking hand. It includes pores. I mean, it's so hyper realistic. And the idea that he would be doing so makes sense from a number of perspectives. Namely, he can preserve his health while still maintaining this illusion, and he can do so indefinitely. He's just playing a character, just like when he was a wrestler. It's not like he's like not actually fit. I mean, he's still obviously exercising and stuff, and he's still athletic, but he's just wearing some enhancements. JRMGTY says, stop the demon aliens versus welcome the Big Bang evolution critters from space. Yeah, so what's it going to be? Again, are we supposed to make love to the aliens and try to create hybrids? Because I hear a lot of talk about hybrids. Like we're going to have some kind of like merging the two species. And that's perfectly in line with the concept of transhumanism. That's why I think it was interesting that he asked the aliens' mate name and asked what is their name, because we're talking about two competing worldviews, and the new one is this idea of embracing the alien, both extraterrestrial and terrestrial. So the video is called Get Back by Ludacris. Well, I'm thinking back on this, and yeah, I think for movie roles in particular, I think The Rock was wearing a suit. And I think The Rock was always the rubber. Because again, he was significantly larger post WWE, and that doesn't make sense to me. And the fact that they were promoting the muscle suit by that one actor while he was being lauded for having lost weight for a role at the same time just seemed a little too conspicuous for me. So the movie itself, though, I would argue is just propaganda. It's just the worldview shaping that mass media does. It's extremely popular right now. Again, in the book, they nuked Antarctica. It's the same guy who did The Martian. So we're just talking about programming. I would say it was very minimalistic, and it was less about space and technology and more about friendship. And the fact that the guy would abandon his life on Earth in order to go be with his spider alien friend. But what's with the spider thing? That's what I was getting. Because the Adam Sandler movie Space Man was him in a spider thing. Just alone, and it was... Honestly, I didn't finish that one. And I tried. It was depressing. And not only was it depressing, but this idea, too, of portraying the astronaut as an ascetic, like a monk. Like, you go as a monk, you leave the world. There's, like, something saintly about it. And in this one, yeah, he's self-sacrificing. And the whole theme of the movie is about him coming to terms with the fact that he's willing to sacrifice himself for his friend. Because not only did he save the world, but now he's like, I'm going to sacrifice myself to save my friend who needs me. He needs this magic cure for his radiation sickness or something. So, like, the plot, I don't know, maybe the book was better and much richer. I think it was very streamlined. But it was primarily about friendship. And it was, like I said, it was cartoonish. Honestly, it was like I don't know, at times I felt like I was watching Sesame Street. Like, I don't think it was that serious. Like, it was very childish. And I guess it was, it was rated, PG-13. But again, I'm just raising the question, what is it with this idea of bonding with an alien as opposed to being terrified of them? Now, the actor, Ryan Gosling, is he on the left? Is he a MAGA or is he a lefty? I would presume he's a lefty because this is the target audience. And you know who was Mel Gibson was in a movie about aliens, wasn't he? And weren't the aliens, like, terrifying? What was it called? Signs or something? I gotta look it up. But what I'm pointing out here is that in the world stage, both sides agree in aliens, but the two factions differ on whether it's on our side or against us, or to be feared or to be embraced. And I would argue too that aliens are just a progressive version of angels, or rather a science fictionized angel. And it's added into our collective reality because apparently they opened the Overton window enough to admit aliens at the same time that they were admitting demons. And I thought it was peculiar that all these big influencers are suddenly openly talking about demons. Tucker Carlson said there's a demon in his bed and that he had scratches on his back to prove it. iBreak says Gosling left in the movie Barbie. Yeah, that's true. He was in the movie Barbie, which I did a review on it. The best way to describe Barbie is she is in the movie in particular, she's a representation of the new Aeon goddess, what they call Babylon. And I had analyzed the symbolism in that movie before I found out that Margot Robbie was in Babylon. And Babylon is based on Hollywood Babylon, written by Kenneth Anger, who's a Thelemite. They worship the goddess Babylon. And he was right high up in the Church of Satan. And he was also, weirdly enough, photographed in a Aleister Crowley sex dungeon having a conversation with Alfred Kinsley, of all people. So you have this intersection between the sexual revolution, Satanism, and the new Aeon goddess. And so Kenneth Anger filmed a movie called Inauguration of the Pleasure Dome, starring Marjorie Cameron as Babylon, as this goddess. Now the significance here is Marjorie Cameron went on to perform as Babylon in The Ritual, the Babylon working, with Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard. What's up, PsyOp Sidecar? Thank you for joining. Yeah, so to get back to... Oh yeah, the movie. I think this movie was probably targeting the left. And the making love, having babies with aliens and stuff, hybrid stuff, that's not really far off from, I think, where this transhumanism idea gets in. And I don't think it's like literal. I think this is programming. iBrick said, I didn't know a writer for... Oh, yeah, Hollywood Babylon, the book. It's about Hollywood. And in it, he describes... In fact, I think on there, he talks about how the pageantry of the new Aeon's religion, or the new age, is going to be the theater. We're talking about Kenneth Anger. He also did a movie called Invocation of My Demon Brothers, starring Mick Jagger and also Bobby Basoli, who became one of Manson's killers, who had been arrested in a separate incident than the Tate Bianchi killings, or Bianca killings. His separate incident involved stabbing somebody. Weirdly enough, another Manson killer, Susan Atkins, the one who killed or gutted and killed Sharon Tate, was one of the Church of Satan's dancing witches, their topless dancing troupe or whatever. Now, the connection there is fascinating because Sharon Tate was married to Roman Polanski, who did the movie Rosemary's Baby, about a woman being essentially impregnated by the devil. And so that's what I mean, the hybrid thing, the alien thing. There's something here I think is intriguing. And there was some senator recently talking about hybrids, how there are hybrid aliens that are needed, hybrid human aliens are needed to be as like intermediaries between them and us, and that they walk among us. There's been a lot of talk. Like I said, they've opened the Overton window to a lot of this alien talk. But I'm saying that the left is being conditioned to love the aliens. And the right is being conditioned to fear them. And again, I'm saying this is part of the program because it applies to both extra and terrestrial aliens. Extraterrestrial and then earthbound aliens. So it's like, okay, what is going on here? What is the common theme? And it's about this schism in the worldview. So the alien, to me, is more of a metaphor than anything. So the idea of disclosure or aliens being revealed, I think ultimately it's about shaping attitudes and creating allegiances. Plain Decoded says, have you given your take on the mission? Yeah, the April Fool's Day rocket launch, I think that's funny. I mean, I think the whole thing is such a ridiculous joke, but it's essentially a state religion performing its pageantry for Easter. You know, Ishtar, Easter, moon worship, the goddess and the god being represented here. The rocket is the god, the earth god. The moon being the goddess, Artemis, moon goddess, like Diana, moon goddess. And of course, Artemis is the twin of Apollo. And I've been expecting some kind of calamity here because the story has consistently been the cracked, leaking hull of the Artemis II. So it's cracked and it's leaking. And to me, that signifies broken arrow. Like it has some kind of interesting nuky overtones because broken arrow is what they call a nuclear disaster, a lost missile, something unaccounted for. And there have been 32 of those. And if space is fake, or if these missions are fake, then why do they have delays? Why do they have disasters? Why do they have these buildups? Well, it's part of the show. And it creates more of a story. It makes it more persistent. But yeah, I think what we were basically seeing is some kind of sun and moon worship, some great rite. And what these rituals also do, these ceremonies, is they synchronize the masses. That's why I said it was significant here that the astronaut is asking for 8 million people to simultaneously pray for the astronauts while they're on the dark side. You see, that correlates with Easter and praying for the Savior during the period of darkness before he comes back. It's all ceremony. And the more I look at the interactions online, the more I think that these big flat earth channels are there to distract from any legitimate criticism of NASA. You get these disinformation spammers like Fittest Flat Earther, who should be in jail. Jacques says, a couple days ago you said the F word in a video, 9 years, and I think that's the first time I've ever heard you swear. It's wild. Yeah, I don't swear. At least not in public. Yeah, Jorge, that's a good question about the probing aliens. That comes from Whitney Strieber's book, Communion. And Whitney Strieber is still around, and he still pushes the story that he was abducted. But the idea of alien abductions has been admitted to be a government-created hoax. So a lot of these individuals are either grifters or disinformation agents. And I think they're promulgating a government-created counterculture. The question of whether aliens are real is not even a scientifically valid question. It's not an ology. There's no real ufology. It's a superstition. And that needs to be made clear. People think because it's science fiction-y, it's science. No, it's not science. It's not a valid question. In my Twitter feed, someone had said something about how simulation theory answers a lot for them because they're atheists. And I'm like, well, simulation theory is not a theory. It's not falsifiable, so it's outside the purview of the scientific method, which means it's a metaphysical construct. And what kind? Monotheistic. It's just God by another name. So you're not an atheist if you believe we're in a simulation. I mean, maybe you're an atheist to that particular religion, like Christianity or something, but that's like saying Christians are atheists with regard to the Greek gods or the Roman gods. It's like, no, it's an alternative God construct. And I've met a lot of simulation theorists, and I notice that they all think the same way, which kind of makes me believe that we're in a simulation. It's like these people are all programmed in some way. But it's because they're following along the same type of thinking that goes into monotheism, where it's what you call the God of the gaps explanation. Things you can't explain are just ascribed to this higher power. And that's this appeal to what you call the divine fallacy. So whatever we can't explain, we can attribute to God, and we don't have to actually explain it. And I'm like, well, that's a good way to stop thinking from going in a certain direction. JRG says they can create an emergency in space and resurrect them on Sunday. Well, that's what I'm saying. So the rocket, the obelisk, represents the resurrecting Savior. So if you look at that as Christ. And is today Good Friday? Like today is the day of the crucifixion? In fact, in the movie, and it's in my notes here, you do see some Christification symbolism with this character. What's that? How old is the actor Ryan Gosling? How old is the science teacher he's portraying? I'd be curious to know. So it goes out there into space. It goes into the darkness for a minute, and then it comes back on Easter. Yeah, to me, that's just too perfectly. It's a ceremony. It's a Catholic Mass, in a sense. A Gnostic Catholic Mass, a pagan Catholic. What I mean is, it contains all the elements. You know what Neil Armstrong did when he got on the moon? You know, he performed a Catholic Mass. He said he poured wine in a chalice, and he broke bread, and he did the Catholic Eucharist. You can read about it. But they wouldn't record it because they didn't want to get blowback from atheists. So I'm saying it's a religious rite. And that's really the end of it. Like, you're not going to space. Oh, it's not the end of it, because the other element to it is this. They can use it as a thought experiment. So it's a collective thought experiment where they can introduce to the masses the best way to live, the utopia. We must live on Earth as we do on Mars. Look how sustainable it is. And they don't have borders or guns. Good question. Can you pour wine in 0 G? Yeah, he actually writes about that, about how the wine poured in the cup and how it bounced around or it floated around. He talks about it in the article. Look it up. Eucharist on the moon. King Ravana says tidal locked wine. Yeah, I think it would be tidally locked. It's going to face the earth. Well, weren't they on the far side? I remember Alex Jones was talking about how he and his son were in his backyard with a telescope looking at the track marks from the lunar rover. You know that remote control car that they played on slow-mo in the back of the 7-Eleven parking lot? And they changed it to make it look like the moon. I mean, that's what it looked like. It looked like a parking lot. But anyway, you have that rover going around. Alex Jones claimed he and his son saw the tracks through his telescope. He used to have Buzz Aldrin on all the time. And I'm looking at this, just realizing, okay, people will lie. Look, believers are liars. They lie to themselves, and so they have no problem lying to others. And lying to yourself, you can actually more or less convince yourself. There's a way It's like the misinformation effect, where you can kind of, like, quite literally lie to yourself, where you become a little detached from the fact that it was originally a lie. Good confabulators are like this. It's like they put up a wall. And it's a common thing with believers to reflexively defend their faith by making up crap. And they stand on it. And it's a way of, like, in a way they can kind of, for the most part, bully most people. Most people won't push back against belief for the same reason that most people won't call out crisis actors or question somebody's grief if they're on TV, because they want to be polite, they want to be sensitive. And I'm not really all that sensitive to people's beliefs if they're in the arena of ideas. Like, I don't care to engage in people with their belief systems. I don't try to disabuse them. Like, if you believe in God or atheism, or you're an alien believer, it's none of my business. But if we're debating it, yeah, we have to be honest. And yeah, believers are all liars. Because any premise that you accept that was only something you could have accepted through the use of a logically fallacious line of reasoning is technically a lie. That's why I use the term Gnostic, lowercase g. I think we should be more about knowing and becoming informed about that which we do not believe that the consensus might, or rather the consensus does. So they, like, the majority of people believe things that they don't have a lot of reason to, but everyone else does. So it's a very thin, very low information belief. And those are the things that I think it's important when you say you don't believe in it, that you have a firm basis. It's not like, oh, I don't believe it because it's on TV. That's not actually good enough. It's not skeptical enough. And I was kind of cajoling the people who think that the Jeffrey Epstein lookalike is actually him, because I'm saying, on what evidence? You saw a photograph from across the street that went viral? Is that all it took? If I was going to put my credibility on the line and say, Pistol Pete, or whatever his name is in Florida, is Jeffrey Epstein, if I was going to put my credibility out there and make such a bold claim, I wouldn't do it based on one photograph. I would have all the available videos. The guy's reachable. I would call him. I would look into his backstory, pictures of him from 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, because he has a pretty well-established history. And so I would say, no, my information contradicts the premise. What's your information? You saw a single video. So low information believers exist on both sides of this thing, mainstream and alternative. And I still think it's also an indicator of how unserious this environment is, where some guy becomes a celebrity because of his resemblance to the most notorious human trafficker on earth. Oh yeah, Palm Beach Pete. Busy56 says, morning, yeah, this Wonder Man show is interesting. Ben Kingsley plays the ultimate crisis actor, hired to play a fake terrorist called the Mandarin, originally in Iron Man 3. I saw a clip from a movie someone played last night that talked about squibs. And I'm seeing a lot of content now questioning what the Trump thing, and you know what the guardrail is? Though they killed the fireman. So in other words, yeah, Trump faked his ear wound, but they ended up killing somebody anyway, which is a strange claim. So I see these people saying Trump's a murderer. So what's more likely? If you're staging an event that includes firing blanks and simulating a gunshot wound, what's more likely? That you're going to simulate a casualty, or that you're going to murder somebody in the middle of your simulation? So the bloody guardrail, the assumption that if there's a death toll in the story, it's real, that's what holds a lot of people back. Jorge says Pete's getting more attention than the Epstein case got. The math isn't mathing. Well, he's a celebrity now. He flies around in a private jet. He's an influencer. Everybody, I mean, I can't wait for him to hang out with the look smasher, Clavicles, and then he can go on Nick Fuentes. Maybe Candace Owens can have him on. But if you take away the presumption that the fireman actually died in Butler, it raises too many questions. Like, why was Trump kissing the fireman's helmet on at the RNC convention? The family grieving on TV. They got a big check at a ceremony. Trump comes out like Ed McMahon with a gigantic check that he gives to the survivors of the Butler event. Did you see that? It's like, okay, this is funny. Because, yeah, if that guy's not really dead, that's a big scam. And where are all the people who were predicting the end of the world a couple weeks ago? I love all these wannabe prophets. Oh, the world's going to end next week because they said disclosure. So what is disclosure? So, okay, as I said, aliens are a science fictionized version of angels for the atheists out there to believe in. So what does disclosure mean? Well, disclosure is just a reinvention, a repackaged version of Revelation. The idea of the book of Revelations or Revelation, it's like, okay, the curtain's going to drop and everything's going to just be revealed. Like, that's not going to happen, but a lot of people are attracted to that idea. Plain Dakota says, I wish you had made a documentary footage of this. What are you referring to? Oh. Yeah, well, I will be doing documentaries. I'm a little short on time these days because of the extra work that I'm doing, but that's because I'm getting us into an office space. Commenter says that clavicular guy was getting a streamer to choke him out and he passed out in the live stream. Yeah, I saw that, but I saw some people saying that's not a real seizure. Like he was faking it. I don't pay attention to him. I think it's weird that he was introduced to the world and popularized through the right wing, far right, and incels. Because that's who this looks maxing way of life is being targeted at. And it's basically guys comparing themselves to guys for each other's approval. And at the same time, having this view that women don't matter, that they're, it's sort of a misogynistic thing. It's very bizarre. But my point of it is, maybe it's not bizarre. Maybe it's actually kind of normal. But I mean, it's just people competing for what they call the sexual market value. So, I mean, it's not that unheard of that you would have this type of trend emerge. But I'm saying it's bizarre that it's being presented from the far right who claim to be looking for trad wives. Oh, traditional lifestyle, trad wives. They should be looking like lumberjacks. Not these, clean shaven guys wearing makeup and pounding their cheeks with the hammer to make it red and whatever they're doing, strutting around like models. That's not exactly the trad man. And if they're trying to get trad wives, it doesn't make sense. Like the trad wife isn't going to go for night at the Roxbury type guys. So again, it just doesn't add up. Does anything about the woke right, far right add up? And I think what's also true about the far right is that it's all just cosplay. They're like furries, basically. Like it's just an identity thing. It's a club, and it's a special like in-group thing, but it doesn't really have any real-world significance or impact on their lives. As long as people don't find out what they're into. Plain Dakota says the Nathan Oakley crew. Oh, Nathan Oakley's a domer. And he's dishonest and he's rude. And he's become sort of a Marshall Applewhite kind of cult leader, like Heaven's Gate. Like, I don't know where he's going to go. I haven't followed him recently, but I just think he was so obsessed with proving the existence of the dome. And it seemed like when he would start shouting at anybody contradicting it, it's almost like he was shouting so that he wouldn't have to hear his own voice in his own head saying, Nathan, you know this is bullshit. There's no dome. And he's like, get that voice out of my head. Of course there's a dome. You can't have a pressure system without a container. Like, but Nathan, you can't have, and he gets louder and louder, a pressure system without a container. And he just starts repeating and repeating and repeating. I mean, I went through this treatment with him. And I was like, well, you have a pressure gradient. So that kind of disputes what you're saying, but you can't get those words out. And look, no shade for the furries out there. I'm just noticing them because the last shooter was furry adjacent. Thomas Crook was a furry. And I'm like, what happened to lone wolf shooters? Now they're all lone furries. Busy says, what do you think about the article about the Artemis bathroom being out of order? Yeah, see, okay, now that's weird, right? You said toilet humor and sex magic. Okay, interesting combination. Now, what I find weird about that is that the movie I just watched, Project Hail Mary, and again, Hail Mary, I think that has Isis symbolism built into it. Isis, Ishtar, goddess stuff. But one of the things about that movie is the bizarre humor about getting to know every face of the alien. And the alien sleeps, and it's like basically the orifice is in his face. I mean, it's like really weird. And then he tries to teach the alien to fist bump, and the alien is consistently saying to him, fist my bump. So that's kind of like, if you ask me, I don't know. I felt like I was watching two movies. I was watching a very boring, sci-fi kind of space odyssey movie about isolation and self-sacrifice. And then I saw a movie about a budding friendship, interspecies love, and then getting into some of the uncomfortable areas in an oblique way. Like, I think that what we were supposed to see there is basically love, interspecies love. Not like bestiality, but what do you call it? What do you call it when you're in love with an alien? I don't know the terms for this. Jorge says, Ishtar weekend, don't forget. Yeah, I've got the long weekend off, like I said, so I plan to get a lot of work done. I've already put in enough overtime, so much overtime, in fact, that they sent me home early. But I put in enough to guarantee that next week I'll be setting up the office space. And then 2 weeks later, I'll be placing orders for the PSYOP cards and getting the tabloid started. So we're getting very close to the invasion, the off-world stage invasion. We should set a date. I had a few dates in mind. I mean, May Day sounds good to me. May 1st. Going through your comments. So I don't celebrate these holidays. I don't go to any of the events. But I see people going, and I have no problem with church. Honestly, I think that church is good. Like, a lot of the people who are here wanting to debate me on religion, it's like, just go to church. Because the people I see who go to church seem to have it together. They seem happy. It's a nice community. I have no problem with it. It's the internet religious nutcases that drive me crazy because they're engaged in ideological warfare. They're engaged in proselytizing a religion. And a lot of them are disingenuous. Most, and this is just what I've observed, most of the Christians that I see in Trutherville are really more political than religious, but they find that if they put up that logo, they put the cross emoji, they get more credibility with Christians. Because apparently it's like a key to somebody's, mind. You just, oh, look, I have this symbol. Oh, I'm going to believe what you say. Look how many people can't see through it. How many people have fallen for this martyrdom of Charlie Kirk? They were comparing him to the first Christian martyr, Stephen. A question I want to start asking people is, what is the objective here? Like when you look at your various content creators, what are their objectives? Is it entertainment? Or are they engaged in a sincere attempt to unravel some vast, mysterious conspiracy? Are they trying to gain approval from the mainstream? Is that the barrier? Like, oh, well, we're just trying to show the mainstream that we have a point. Like, we're going to prove them wrong. Because that's never going to happen. That's not the dynamic. It's not an honest debate. The left, right, back and forth is not based on some legitimate attempt to find some unifying truth here. It's always going to be split in two. That's why I think it's so conspicuous that aliens are simultaneously demons and our buddies. It can't be both. Either we're going to form an intergalactic community and we're going to merge with the aliens and become one, or we're going to fight them and remain isolated. So you see how this might actually pertain to not literal aliens, but how we organize the world, globalism versus nationalism. That's kind of what I'm getting at. Open borders embrace the alien, closed borders reject the alien. Globalism, nationalism. I think that's the setup here. Angels, demons, or friends, demons, friends, enemies. There's this consistent split. And it wouldn't be like that if it was legitimate. That's one of the major hallmarks of a PSYOP. And I believe this was axiom number 47. Auto hoaxer axiom 47. The bifurcation in a PSYOP is an indicator that it's fake. If it's designed to get both sides to agree on something to fight over, so they both believe in it, but they fight over it. Jorge says, space is fake AF. Now, what do you think about space? Do you think that space travel is completely fake? Because when we say fake, we have to qualify it. Like some will say, oh, like Candace Owens will say they faked the moon landing because they had to trick the Russians. Even Joe Rogan will concede on this point. He'll argue for this point that, oh yeah, we had to trick the Russians. We had to. They say it with pride. Oh, we tricked them because we had to. We had to win the propaganda war. Well, it certainly admits there the belief in the significance of the propaganda victory. But what they're wrong is that this propaganda victory is against the whole world. Busy says, speaking of borders and vax, the new Resident Evil game, at the end, you find out they're trying to release a vaccine to get rid of the zombies, and then the world comes together. Fascinating. The vaccine is a savior. I've always thought that the zombie apocalypse movies were way too popular. Like, we were being saturated with the stuff for a long time. And I made a lot of, artwork in that genre because people would just buy it. I'm like, why are people so into zombies? And they kind of disappeared. But I've been thinking, what was the point? And in retrospect, it seems to me that the zombie movies were all predictive programming for quarantine. And what's the savior in every zombie movie? It's always the guy with the pure blood, the right blood, who can be turned into the vax for the world. It's always about world salvation, salvation by blood. But it also involves the moral questions, the decisions you have to make. What's the right choice? Do you open the door for these people who might be infected, or do you keep the door closed? Because if you open the door, that might be an asymptomatic super spreader. So you have to say, do we sacrifice this individual to preserve the group? And you see in the movie what happens to the people who open the door because of their empathy, because they want to trust the person who didn't get into lockdown. And then, of course, everybody dies. And during the lockdowns in 2020, there were many accounts of families reporting that, oh yeah, our kids went out for spring break, so we didn't let them back in the house. Wouldn't let them in. We changed the locks. Nate Watley says, I noticed a significant reduction in lifted trucks with zombie outbreak task force. Yeah, I've seen a lot of those weirdos around with their big trucks and their zombie extermination slogans. Usually they're paintball enthusiasts, but they really spend their lives living in this fantasy that someday everything's going to end and they'll have an opportunity to just live out their favorite video game. I mean, again, I'm not going to knock it. It's like, okay, you're a zombie killer, you're a furry, you're a griper. What's the difference? But I think zombies, obviously, it's a decent metaphor for collectivism. The book I Am Legend kind of started this. It was a pandemic stemming from a bat virus. Imagine that. But it's a vampire bat. So the world becomes vampires. So it's not specifically zombies, but that was followed up by the man who felt the last man on Earth, and the Omega Man. The whole genre, though, really started with I Am Legend. So the zombie thing kind of evolved over time. And the zombies went from comically slow, they're dead, they're decaying, to these superhuman, or yeah, basically like these killing machines who can climb up walls like ants. Yeah, Serpent in the Rainbow is dumb. And a lot of this, when people think of voodoo, they say the word voodoo, which isn't really an accurate term for what is actually a diverse set of belief systems from around the world that have certain common denominators, but many of the things attributed to it come from Hollywood movies. Like, there's no such thing as a voodoo doll. As in, the puppets that you put needles in, that's a European thing. That was never a magical practice associated with any of the African traditions. Although you have this amalgamation here in America of many different disparate traditions that have kind of merged all together to where now they're kind of are now, but I'm just saying that they're not really like authentically from, quote, voodoo. Mizelle says Korean zombies are fast and terrifying. Right. That's what I mean. Because if you start, like people used to ask me all the time, when you're transporting bodies around, do they ever sit up? Because there's this rumor that they spread, which isn't true. And it's like, find me a living person, that can just do a sit up with their legs straight. Like, you'd have to be braced, someone have to hold your feet for the most part, unless you're in shape. And if you're dead, you're probably not in shape. Like, I mean, you probably weren't in shape. But anyway, it's like, no, they don't sit up. So how do these zombies become physically stronger in death when their blood's not pumping? They're dehydrating. So that doesn't make sense. But those are just really, bad movies anyway. The vampire thing makes more sense. The I Am Legend version. And I Am Legend, the reason why he dies is he succumbs to loneliness. And a woman knocks on his door and he lets her in. And she concealed it. She was a covert vampire. Like, not the obvious overt vampire, but the kind that doesn't really show their face, their true mask, until they're firmly in control of you. I've met those types. Frank Murr, appreciate the support. Ben Case, Kojo, Essence Uncaged, Texas Goat Radio, Austin Murphy, Stanley Crone, Big Hair Tsunami, Travis Cloud, and Marie Laveau, of all people, have all received a gift membership by Frank Murr. So you'll be getting a blue shield, which blocks mind aids. And it goes with your wrench. But you know what? I'm interested in the entire subject of magic and sorcery, its history, where it comes from, the esoteric, as it's practiced. Because these things evolve. And the more recent traditions have been extremely eclectic, self-consciously aware of the inauthenticness of their traditions. Because it used to be the traditions were pure, word of mouth, initiates given the story, after a certain context and oaths. And so everything was kept very pure. But what's characterized the occult and the esoteric in the last 100+ years has been the merging of many different systems. I mean, that's what Aleister Crowley's work was fundamentally about. And that was from 1904, where it described this new aeon where all of the previously gate-kept knowledge would be released. And I was told by members of that group, the Golden Dawn, the Thelemic offshoot, it was called the Abbey, and they had said that the age of Aquarius and the water bearer refers to the deluge of information, as all the concealed information is going to be revealed for people to find their own way without the need of an intermediary. So they were projecting this global shift in consciousness that would be precipitated by the floodgates being opened. And so if you look at the work of Crowley and subsequent traditions, they borrow from all kinds of places. And some of it's even fake. For example, Wicca. Maybe it's real and it's an amalgamation of a lot of things, but the idea of the Book of Shadows and their 3 degrees of initiation, yeah, that was mirrored off of the Masonic stuff. It was created by a guy named Gardner. Is that his name? The guy who created the degrees. And in his work, it was the craft, which is what the Masons even call it. But anyway, his Book of Shadows and the claim that it had this ancient lineage was all made up. And I think he had some correspondences with Aleister Crowley, which would make sense because there's a lot of overlap in the ritualism, in the ritual and the spells themselves. In fact, I've done some deep dives and I've been reading a lot of books on the matter in the last few years. And I met a number of individuals representing different covens because it's really actually here, I think this state might just be, maybe it's everywhere, but it's a growing tradition, the whole pagan thing. And like I said, it's very eclectic. It's a mashup of a lot of influences. Ollie Goering says, so the internet. Yeah, the internet would be part of it, but it's really about the removal of barriers to access of stuff that was previously hidden. Hey, thank you so much. What's happening? Appreciate the channel support. As you know, in a couple of weeks, we're upgrading back into a studio, and someone had mentioned the phones. Yeah, Jorge, that is true. We will be using the phone system again. Infinite Plane Radio was originally meant for, caller-driven podcasting. I mean, callers and chat. But when we start the new one, it's going to have a 1-800 number. and I will have the questions on the screen like I used to. I had a formula, and we used to have pretty decent callers on specific topics. But I want to have some rules in place, so we can't have, we can't have calls go on longer than a certain amount of time if they're off topic. Like on topic, you can stay on the phone. Off topic, 2 minutes. I mean, if that. I mean, really, we have to really, I think, push back now. And that's one of the next phases here, is pushing back against intellectual dishonesty. I think pushing back against orthodoxies and guardrails relentlessly. And I don't think there's any reason to make any compromises, and because it comes down to what's more important, the objective truth or people's emotions. What's up, Jimbo Khan? Here is your wrench. Yeah, we're not going to let the callers derail. And, I've been very polite to people, and it's my background. I got into telemarketing, loss prevention, mitigating the anger of customers, reaching common ground, you agree and stuff. And I don't think that's going to work moving forward. And I think people do call with agendas. And you'll notice when there's more listeners, you get more calls as well. Because people will want to, no droning on fake history. Yeah, if I get some caller who wants to lecture us about the events of the day or even recent history, we have to really challenge the premise. Because if they're speaking from a world stage perspective, it'll be obvious. And that's what I want to do as well, is demonstrate that there are a lot of opinions and positions you can take that constitute an internal diversity of thought within the world stage. However, they're all within the same boundary. And outside of that boundary, special effects, simulated events, bent news, and bent history. Metascript, future written in advance, performed in front of us through psyops that we fight over by design to create the engagement to make the events real in the mass mind. We're observing the manufacturing of history proactively, and this is the only conspiracy that's real, and it's ongoing. All the other conspiracies are actually part of a operation to contain wandering minds, which they've done successfully. And they will continue to do so because that's their job. So somebody sees through an event, they give you a conspiracy theory to throw you off of the fact that it's fake. Oh, that Trump thing looked fake. Yeah, because it was a false flag in order to win the election, but that fireman died. So they agree with you it's fake, but they still maintain the fireman died. And what that does is it maintains that Trump and his team did this. It doesn't ask the wider questions. Like, what's the role of the Secret Service? What's the role of the media in a bipartisan way promoting the simulated event as real? Where's the actual criticism or scrutiny from those who are against Trump? Because there's no attempts to unravel the news fakery from within. I always thought the anti-gun people should be putting, like, look, Armalite paid $73 million to the Sandy hookers. Crisis acting for money. That's why I call them that. 73 million. It's like you could have paid $30,000 and had some effective documentaries made that would reveal that Adam Lanza didn't kill anybody. That nobody died. That nobody dies in staged events. And I see it on X. There's still a lot of people who don't know that people do not really die in simulated events. And that's because they have been hit with nonstop narratives, frameworks by people like InfoWars that put things in the context of false flags, meaning, oh, it's real, but somebody else did it. Charlie Kirk is dead, but Erica Kirk shot him. Charlie Kirk is dead, but Netanyahu shot him. Charlie Kirk is dead, but the mic exploded and blew up his neck. That's Joe Rogan's take. Joe Rogan's like breaking down how the rifle that he used would have blown a hole clean through the guy's neck. So he's there from the outside perspective, questioning the truth. Well, no, actually he's not. He's reinforcing the lie because his starting point is that Charlie is dead. If that's your starting point, you're on the world stage. That's what I mean. You're in that perimeter. Our perspective is inclusive of squibs. If you're not aware of squibs and the art of Psywar, and I have a video that I'm developing that I thought I was going to get done last week, but I just did not have time. But I do have time now between today and Sunday. Yeah, busy, exactly. Professor Jang, who does, quote, predictive history, saying it's fake, but Israel's behind it. Yeah, the guy's a plant. He's probably a skull and bonesman. His freshman year of college, he got tapped. He probably exhumed some skull, stole some license plates with 322, engaged in some quasi-Masonic chicanery. I mean, it's just a cult. But yeah, he's a skull. I'm not saying he's skull and bones, but he's a Yale guy. And he has an interesting background. Hidden America did an expose. I don't need to look at all that. I can just look at his perspective. He is MSM plus. So there's 3 perspectives that you have available to you. And you can be in denial about this. It doesn't make a difference. You're either MSM, which is mainstream mediation. You exist within those closed boundaries, the parameters they establish, where these events are real. We can fight over who did it. That's your framework if you're mainstream. If you're a conspiracy theorist, though, you're taking the mainstream assumption and adding to it. So you got MSM, and then you have MSM plus. So Professor Jang is an MSM pluser. He takes the official story for granted and adds to it. MSM and MSM plus are both establishment controlled, and both of them rest upon the premise that recent history is real. They don't account for the media fakery that we do. Our perspective is MSM minus, which is the subtractive route, which exists outside of their closed system but includes it because we are informed of it. We're not just on a media fast, turning off our TV and not paying attention to the internet. Not at all. We're just aware of what we're seeing because we're looking at it through a critical lens that is inclusive of history bending, metascript, concurrent predictive programming, the entrainment between entertainment and news, the accumulation of fake news and the effect that it has on the now. Not to mention the fact that psychological operations are intrinsic to what media does because media is an extension of government. And if that's not your perspective, nothing you say is true. Everything you say is going to be part of their, what I call theater of Psywar. You've left objectivity and you're in the realm of hyper reality. Hyper real means real mixed with fake. Like, for example, let's just say you're a Mormon or you're a Scientologist or whatever you are. Okay, you live in the real world with us. You have to do what everyone else does. Just live as a human being, terrestrial survival, usual pressures and obligations of life. But you also believe in a bunch of other stuff that you can't verify. Might believe in Xenu and engrams and thetans and suppressive persons. And your desire is to clear the world of these things. That's Scientology, which is based on this science fiction mythos. So again, real mixed with fake. Well, mass media has introduced a set of myths that have been collectively assimilated into the worldview as real. So we do live in a hyper reality. Every simulated event that gets passed off as real, that gets added to our history books, further distances the world stage from objective reality. So if you live in the world where 9/11 was real, we live in a different universe. JRG says that professor's all over the algorithm. I'll be honest with you, because a lot of people recommended him. I liked his presentations. I find a lot of his stuff interesting. But I intuitively knew that he was a plant on day one. And that's how intuition works. You get a gestalt. You may not even have all the specific reasons why, but you're picking up on a lot of things that fit a broader pattern recognition. And it was very clear to me when I first saw him that he was a plant. A few weeks later, I watched a lot of his videos and I saw, okay, I can see where he's leading his audience. This guy he's woke right territory, Trutherville territory, MSM plus, and he ends up on Tucker Carlson. It didn't take long. And when I saw the name Predictive History, my first thought was, it looks like another attempt to pre-co-opt this space. Because we are the only think tank on the internet that are talking about prefabricated history. That globally we live in a system of government-controlled thought that uses media and entertainment to create and also pageantry like NASA, to create a singular worldview and to synchronize us to it through a nonstop succession of simulated historical events. And these events, and this is the part that conspiracy theorists tend not to be able to reach. They can't get the implications, or they're not ready to confront this. These events are often planned decades in advance. So if you can't reconcile with Charlie Kirk's assassination having been planned in the 90s, this isn't going to make sense to you. You're not thinking big enough. You're missing the forest for the trees. And once you get to that point, it raises a bunch of other questions. And that's where we're at. See, we've got this, essentially this Trojan horse. So it's like, oh, it's a minor point. They're faking history. Oh, it's no big deal. Obviously, they're faking history. Like, people can agree with this, and they'll cite mud flood. And they'll look at history books. There's obviously retconning and fights over what history should be and who represents it. So you can look at history, broadly speaking, and say, yeah, it's not necessarily objective. It represents the power elite. Sure, that's partially true. But there's another element to it. We're looking at 6 decades plus of simulated, significantly historic, significant events that are actually in the textbooks. So these historical events of great historical import happening with regularity have been filling our history books for decades. So we can prove that our history is not only non-objective, but that it's proactively manufactured. It's not just selectively editing or curating, but it's actually manufactured. And so one of the questions this brings up is who's involved, and we can name names. And this is where it gets ugly. And this is where I don't even care to elaborate on this, but no conspiracy theorist out there, no truther out there has any viable plan to stir up any kind of demands for accountability or to expose anybody beyond shadowy groups. It's like, oh, it's the Frankists, it's the Illuminati, it's the EGI, it's the Reptoids, it's the Jesuits, it's Israel. They have all these vague groups, but we can name names of people who are directly and or 1 degree separated from these simulated events. We can, the metascriptors, we can identify, but it goes even deeper than that, because we can essentially demonstrate the entrainment between government propaganda events and movies, which presupposes that our consensus reality has not only been hijacked on a global scale, but essentially it has taken away any notion that we have any kind of say in anything. You know, Walter Lippmann, in his book, The Phantom Public, he wrote 100 years ago, talked about this, about manufactured crisis used to essentially gauge where the public's at and then tip them, steer them. This was talked about by George Soros in his book, where he wrote this one of his books on finances, but he talked about what he called social alchemy. And he referred to this thing called reflexivity, which refers to messaging and cajoling the consensus and engaging in dialectics to change history. Well, what does he mean, changing history? He's not talking about rewriting history books. He's talking about steering human events through dialectics. Well, when I say every single psyop is bifurcated, what does that mean? It means each one is a dialectic. It's a construct design with these two opposing sides that lead to a predetermined outcome. And every single simulated event has that bifurcated interpretation. Reflexivity, he's talking about the pervasiveness of the messaging through every single outlet, every propaganda vector. That's what we've referred to many times as concerted messaging, the echo chamber effect. My point is, you can find admissions here and there where at some strata, at some level, there's some deep awareness about how the masses are being steered like sheep. And what it comes down to is, if they're planning things decades in advance, not just events to be simulated, but characters to cause the events, to populate these simulations, the actors, the individuals who we interact with through social media, but who have always been plants. Well, they're all over. These plants can be exposed. In other words, yeah, it's one thing to deconstruct a fake event, but wait till we start deconstructing fake people. Like, yeah, they're real. See, I see this trend where there's these truthers who will say, oh, Jeffrey Epstein is CGI. He never existed. Oh, Jim Carrey? Nah, he's not a clone. He never existed. I hear these people saying these things. Ghislaine Maxwell was pixels. She never existed. And I've been wondering, what's the utility of this particular misinformation line? Why would you start telling people who are looking into media fakery that these people do not even exist? And now I think I know. I think the reason why is to muddy the waters, because we're talking about people who exist physically, but who are playing roles. We're not talking about people who don't even exist. So there's always these attempts to take the facts that are being discussed and then steer them into misdirection and confusion. So anybody who's confused can be ignored. I'm not confused. I'm not making, like, I don't know what's real and what's fake. No, I'm the opposite of confused. The confused people, and when I say confused, they're existing through a confusion, a deliberate merging of real and fake, where the meta-scripted events are merged into the real timeline. The majority of the confused don't even know they're confused. Did Trump know he was, oh, not Trump, did Truman in the Truman Show, did he know he was confused about the basic facts of reality? No, he was the last to know. So anybody coming up with some additional confusion should just be ignored. I'm not going to name names, but when the time comes, they'll have to answer for it. Like, what is your objective here? Entertainment? Or are you a person who's legitimately seeking to expose the workings of this thing? And those who aren't serious can gradually be phased out. And, just go back, put them out to pasture in Trutherville. There's this big paddock out there. You can find all kinds of breadcrumbs. It's very entertaining. Because I'm not in this for conspiratainment. I mean, that's part of it, I guess, because it's part of the idea here is simply that we are looking at weaponized entertainment. We're looking at bread and circuses used as a form of mind control. I watched that movie yesterday, knowing full well that the public is deeply entertained by this, but they're not being entertained so much as they're being propagandized. They're accepting certain core messages. Lean Dion says it's notable that all the major events are always timed celestially. Yeah, I think there's something else to consider here too. Even the New Age movement and this idea of a illuminated elite guiding the masses is all based upon the precession of the equinox, the new sign for the age, the age of Pisces, the age, you have all these ages we go through. Well, it's all based on the celestial. And we hit the reset 12/21, 2020, this great conjunction, Jupiter and Saturn, the great reset. And I think that was really the starting point for this new aeon where everything is going to be fast tracked. And I think we're seeing it. And everything that we're looking at now seems to be an accelerant on the process. I mean, look at what's happened with generative AI art and video and how that's transformed the marketplace of ideas. And not only that, but the increased fakeability of everything has made it to the point where the average person, not the average, nobody can actually tell real from fake anymore if it's on a screen. I mean, you might be able to pick up on things here and there, little glitches, but generally speaking, most people can't. And in the future, the subsequent iterations are going to be so good, it will be indistinguishable. So what does that do? Where does that put us? If we're now globally, in a state where we can no longer discern real from fake, and we get our worldview from the same, these sources that are presenting information that we can't even challenge. It's like reason doesn't help. You're not dealing with sophistry. It's not like it's fallacious reasoning. No, you're looking at visuals that are incontestable. Like, what are you going to do when they fake a nuke? You're going to say it looks fake when it doesn't? It's one thing to say, yeah, that looks fake. That looks a little staged right there. But when there's nothing to grab onto to call it fake, what are you going to do? Your personal incredulity isn't going to suffice. The only think tank on the internet that is engaging in media deconstruction from an off-world stage perspective, that would be us. We have a methodology for telling the difference between real and fake that does not rely on visuals. I term the concept the blindfolded skeptic. Meaning, if let's say you're in an elevator and it gets stuck and you're in the dark with a bunch of strangers for the next few hours and you have nothing to talk about, you should be able to convince them that nobody died on 9/11 without having to rely on video or talk about CGI planes or how fake things looked. You should be able to provide the appropriate context in which the discussion can go down that path, where they can see, okay, it's plausible. Like it's something that can be explained when you put it in the right context. And so the context of every fake event includes news bending, history bending, the techniques, the special effects that are used to make these things occur, the interlocking agencies involved in these things, how systemic it is, the evidence of that, the significance of concurrent and predictive programming. All this stuff needs to be brought up in this context, and it needs to be explained away. In other words, let's say you have a list of 50 hoax indicators. If they can't explain away those 50 hoax indicators, then they lose the debate. Lean Dion says 2030 is a culmination in all this. Apparently the decade's been all gas, no brakes. Yeah, well, I said a few years ago that we're moving into a new dark age, and I can see it very clearly now. It's this, first of all, they've already put the black mirror in front of us. This is the hoodwink. So we're already in their deception. But what they had done I think, over the last few years is they've perfected it. They've removed any sort of glitchiness. Maybe they've even bounced off of those of us who were looking very closely to see what the weaknesses were. But I think they've tailored a new system that will be, like I said, incontestable. So if you don't have the right operating system to discern real from fake, you're going to be lost. And a lot of the people who are self-described truthers aren't really engaging in this with a formal methodology that is reliable, but they're just shooting from the hip. Like, oh, it looks fake. I mean, and that's why I push back against, oh, Jim Carrey was obviously an Illuminati sacrifice brought back as a clone in order to mock the masses. Like, I push back against that because your claim is based on personal incredulity in that case. And again, that kind of thinking gets a pass. It goes trending, it gets viral, but it doesn't do anything as far as elucidating any basic truth or facts. But what it exposes is that there's an army of grifters, clickbaiters, engagement farmers who are simply in it for the momentary titillation. It's basically tabloid. And again, I don't care if people choose to immerse themselves in this stuff, but lately, because we've been doing this for a long time, but we've been doing this with a purpose. And I've seen some channels of people who usually people I block, and I'm like, well, what have they done in the last 5 years? Like, have they made any sort of headway? Like, what actions have they taken? And I'm finding that there are no actions being taken. It's like the voting booth is there to give the illusion of control. The truthers have X and the internet to post their truth, which gives them an illusion of control. Like, oh, I'm fighting the system, I'm raising awareness, I'm retweeting this banger of a tweet that exposes the deep state. I did my part. Yeah, that is actually depleting their will. So instead of actually doing something, they're just emoting about it. And meanwhile, they're emoting, essentially allowing themselves to be loosh cowed. Their loosh is being harvested, milked by the system while they're fighting the system online. And it's like, a lot of times these people say, oh yeah, you got to get off these websites. You got to stop feeding them your loosh. You got to stop giving your energy to the system. Meanwhile, their entire being is dedicated to the system, but they think they're fighting it. It's like, no, you're being harvested. That's why I'm really opposed to the anti-positions, and I suggest that you become a conscientious objector to the Psywar. Because if you're pro or anti, you're fighting the Psywar. If you're anti in any position, no matter how good your intentions are, you've joined one of the factions. And there is no middle ground where somebody can just be vague and ambiguous and not really hold firm to any positions. There's no middle ground. There's only cowardice. And usually you can reveal where their actual perspective is. It's MSM or MSM plus or somewhere in between. But if it's not outside of that, it doesn't matter. If their perspective is pandering to inside that box, their opinions are essentially being dropped into the sea of irrelevance. Dopplardum says pro-con is another paradigm. Yeah, exactly. So progressive, conservative, left, right. The reason why it's structured so basic is that they are being triangulated. And triangulation is a very specific strategy used by a central manipulator, where one side is favored by the manipulator and the other side is rejected. The rejected side can do no right. The favored side can do no wrong. Therefore, the favored side has more power, and as such, they're always in a position of assumed superiority over the scapegoated, do no wrong, do no right side. So, in other words, the conspiracy theorists are the heel, and it's always going to be that way. Conspiracy theories are really just alternative news. These are subjective terms. But the triangulation is there on purpose because it has them fighting against each other instead of against the central manipulator. And it ensures that they fight over every single psyop. So every time there's a staged historic event, they throw it out, the system puts it out there, and then the two factions fight over it. And it sits back and it watches as they tear each other up. So they simulate an assassination, and you have half the country praising the bloodshed. And then the other half is, ganging up, joining their church of Kirkianity, and talking about the threat of the other side. Why wasn't there a unanimous outpouring of grief? Like, oh, we've taken politics so far. People are dying. Can't we just get... No, there's no reconciling. There's never going to be a unity between the sides because they are triangulated. And that's part of the political horseshoe model, which is intrinsic to this thing. And so the pro-anti positions, the defaults are both establishment. I call it a duopoly because I've seen people say, oh, I stopped following the media 20 years ago. It's like, yeah, but you follow alternative media. So they think because they don't follow establishment media, again, which they see as elite, and they follow what they consider to be the populist media. So elite versus populism is another one, like urban and rural, but elite and populism. So you have Tucker Carlson, an elitist, pretending to be a populist. How many of these individuals are fake populists? I mean, that's what MAGA is essentially catering to. But when you look at this central schism, it gets interesting to see how the populists think that aliens are demons and working for the government. And it's really, to me, this is an excellent construct. I mean, it's an impressive construct because what they have managed to do is they've managed to keep the machine going by consistently throwing out political footballs and then watching us fight, and nobody looks at the central manipulator. And the central manipulator is a liar and a fabricator. And that's what we're talking about here. They don't know the central manipulator exists. And when I say central, I mean, it's a monopoly. There's a worldview monopoly. I mean, that's what fake history ultimately represents. It means that we're living within a version of things as told by this particular monopoly. And then they supply the nonstop barrage of events that trigger the two sides, the factions, in a predictable way. And they feed off of it. And that's why I've been taking this anti-conspiracy theorist stance, is because they all think they have the moral high ground, and yet they're actually carrying water for the enemy. I call them propaganda mules. And they get away with it because they get clicks and they get money. And they have built their entire communities around repeating government-planted lies. There's a reverse psychology built into it. They won't trust the mainstream, but they'll trust anything they find that's leaked or anything from some, quote, independent. And they fall for anybody who looks independent. Look how that Professor Jang convinced so many people. Oh, this guy's legit. It's like, well, he's basically promoting all the same talking points from the same perspective as Tucker Carlson. Duet Celeste says that so many intelligent people sincerely think that Tucker is an independent thinker. That's what I mean. There's a naivety in it as well, because they're playing into some basic psychological manipulation, basic reverse psychology. It's like Tucker Carlson said to your face that he got clawed in his bed by an alien and it bled on his sheets and he's got scars, and he won't show you the scars and you believe him. To me, that just indicates how he knows that his target audience will believe anything and that they're highly superstitious. And he also knows, and this is basic to the understanding that these manipulators have is that the manipulated, the cultists, have a form of Stockholm syndrome where they will defend their cult leader against the other side. They're not going to side with the left and call Tucker a grifter and a manipulator and a charlatan and a propagandist, provocateur, liar. You think they're going to side with the enemy? They're not going to side with the enemy on their attacks on the people that they follow. So what they'll do is they will identify the survival of their chosen pundit with their own. And they see this as like a, just kind of implied that they got to defend their guy. So they overlook that stuff. So no, so intelligence isn't enough to protect you if you have mind aids. And by mind aids, I mean holes in your mental immune system that they programmed there, they put there. And also you're talking about worldview, because the people that we engage with live in the world where January 6th was real. 2020 was real. 2001 was real. The psyop of the day is real. Erica Kirk's real. Oh yeah, she's real and she's really bad. And she actually worked with Netanyahu's son and some guy named Tyler, and they planned to kill Charlie a long time ago. She was never a trad wife. That was all fake. See, they run with that because they think she's real. It's like, no, that is the backstory they planted for you to find. Because Erica Kirk and Charlie Kirk are both actors and he's still alive and she knows it. So she's playing the role of a villain and these people are just following it. They're lapping it up. Erica Kirk is a huge star now, bigger than Charlie ever was, by her haters. The anti-Erica fan club. And you think Candace doesn't know? See, they're all together. It's peas in a pod. Lean Dion says, did you see the clip of Tucker and a guest discussing the moon landing, being afraid to touch it in case it's fake while claiming to look into it and saying hard to tell if it's fake? I have not seen it. I'll have to take a look. JRD says, my sister lives in the super normie realm. She worships the Dr. Heather Cox Richardson. Duet says, I know that people who are libertarian who don't vote but think Tucker is sincere and is not an agent. Well, here's what they're falling for. So he's at Fox and he goes against the grain and they kick him out and he goes independent. So like, oh, he's street level. You know, he's one of us. He's a populist now. And then they show a video of him, of Tucker Carlson, where he's fly fishing, and it looks like staged. And some guy walks up to him. He's like, oh, you're Tucker Carlson. He's like, yeah, I just fly fish. What kind of hooks do you use? And so you have this interaction where Tucker Carlson, the 100 millionaire elitist, is pretending to be some normal Joe just fly fishing. And some random stranger walks up to him and they talk about fishing lines. Like that would ever happen. But that was the exchange that sold him. And then you have Candace Owens working for Daily Mail. She crossed the line. They kicked her out. Oh, look, she's one of us. She's fighting the system. So they have these antis. You see, they went from pro to anti. They go from one side to the other. It's like, oh, we trust them now. Most of the people I interact with today don't have a clue as to who any of these people are. So another element to this internalized Truman Show is that it's mostly just background. And that's what enables it, I think, to go undetected, because it's not directly challenging people who aren't deeply involved. And those who are deeply involved in it, of course, have already been put into their appropriate boxes. But most people are kind of ambivalent. And it works that way because it's all about a consensus and they agree with the mob. So you have low information believers being the dominant. Exactly, Lean Dion. I love how Tucker got fired from Fox for way too much truthing. Oh yeah, he was being so truthful. They had to get rid of him. Now he can say whatever he wants. And what does he say? He basically repeats every woke right truth or orthodoxy we hear all the time anyway. Mixed in with this kind of like faux traditionalism, like these nods to like traditional values that they don't hold in their real lives, and all of their performative Christianity, like Candace Owens converting to Catholicism, purely performative. And that was done. It's kind of interesting if you look at how they have the like evangelical MAGA Turning Point USA crowd, and then you have the Catholic wing. And I find that the Catholic thing seems to appeal more to the woke right and who are deeper into venerating this idea of this traditional worldview, this traditional lifestyle. But none of these people are authentic. Again, one of the biggest proponents of owning a trad wife and being a traditional Christian nationalist is Nick Fuentes, a 30-year-old virgin who thinks that girls have cooties. I mean, did you see him at that nightclub with clavicles? They were approached by women and he just cringed. And I mean, the guy's an incel. Or he calls himself involved. He's a celibate. And I have no problem with celibacy. It's none of my business. But I'm saying he's the face of Christian white nationalism, claiming that they're living under oppression by Israel and that whites are being genocided. It's like, if you think you're being genocided, shouldn't you be having kids? That would be my concern. If I was worried about the population and all this stuff. But I'm not really a collectivist. And I'm certainly not a racial collectivist, which is what they're essentially basing it on, solidarity. It's a huge clown show, and very few people see through it. They take a side in the clown show. So that's one other element. So it's a big clown show, bread and circuses. If you're an anti or a pro, you're playing by the clown show rules. And I'm not in there. I'm not playing by their controlled dialectics. But I look at a Tucker and a Candace as manufactured plants that are so damn obvious. And there's a uniformity of thought. And this is what we're confronting next. What we're confronting as a think tank in the coming months with the open phones is we're confronting the conformity of alt media, the contrived, controlled opposition media. I might just start calling it the controlled opposition media. And it's plugged in to systemic fakery. Oh, that's right. Lean Dion says Tucker's TCN logo is a red pill. So the red pill has a couple meanings. For one, it does have a strong association with the manosphere. So the manosphere, and this is where you get a lot of these like male role models like Andrew Tate and these guys who speak for masculinity like Jordan Peterson. So the manosphere is basically the opposite side as the feminists. So you got feminists, progressive left, female coded, and the right, they call it toxic masculinity, but it's the manosphere, like male feminists. And so red pilling was always saying was basically teaching the truth about feminism and how feminism was brought here by Israel to destroy the American families, specifically white families, because they're being genocided so that immigrants can come in. And see, this whole thing is, the red pill thing was built on finding the guys who are single and resentful towards women and then giving them an excuse for it. Oh, it's because the feminists have corrupted the women. And this is where you see a lot of the woke right types who will complain about women not covering their bodies at the gym. They'll claim they want these traditional values. And that whole manosphere thing is where you get incels. And incel culture is where looks maxing comes in. So looks maxing is this view that your success in the world is predetermined by your looks, but you can max out on whatever you were given genetically, whatever you were blessed or cursed with. And so the looks maxing thing is kind of a very cynical and black pill view of things, that you can't win, so you got to play by these rules. And I'm looking at that as very much, antithetical to trad values, and the fact that it's even popularized is bizarre. But anyway, that came out of incel culture. And so Nick Fuentes, for all we know, Nick Fuentes might have, 6 kids and a wife. We have no clue. We only see what he does on stage. And he has been portraying himself as an incel so he can authoritatively bash women as saying like, oh, they're all corrupt. We don't want them. Unless they're, fitting these particular prerequisites. So it's really performative celibacy. I don't know if it's real. But anyway, that's what the term is often used, but it also encompasses the entire conspiracy theories, the entire realm of like conspiracy theories that wake you up to the great deceptions of the world being controlled centrally. The thing is, red pills all point to Israel. So the red pill is the J pill, but the J pill is just more blatant and obvious about it and not as marketable. Alex Jones could not have made millions and millions of dollars selling J pills because he would have alienated his audience. Plus his wife is one. It wouldn't have made sense. It wouldn't be congruent. His family's multiracial. And of course his audience would have been restricted to, like groypers. So the red pill is a way that they can introduce a lot of these conspiracy theories coated in this shiny, this veneer of just being open-minded inquiry. And then they euphemize things so dog whistles become normal. And they don't say Israel, they'll say George Soros. They'll mention Trilateral Commission. They'll mention all these different groups, the Bilderbergs, Bohemian Grove, but they're indirectly alluding to, and eventually it leads you to the same conclusion. GRG says, I never heard of Nick Fuentes until a few months ago. Yeah, that's not an indicator of anything. I know a lot of people said, I never heard of Charlie Kirk. It's like, well, that doesn't mean anything. Like I am frequently hearing that. And it's like, well, are you paying attention to these specific areas of discourse? Because I've made it a practice to monitor the intelligentsia of the far left and the far right, and all the influencers and their talking points, and how uniform it is. And you can see the puppets who all have the same puppet masters. There's a list of names I could provide, and I can show you, I can allude to examples of how they all get the memo. It was over the course of like 1 or 2 days. There's like a short span of time where suddenly every other right-wing influencer was suddenly talking about going to the gym and having to confront women in yoga pants and how horrible it was for them. And I was just thinking, that's interesting. What is this? Why are they all bringing this up? And now I know. They were handed a talking point, which is because the woke right basically believes, and you can find thinkers from like Henry Makow, I think really started this, arguing that the bikini is a symbol of Western decline and that the burqa is superior to the bikini and a true respecter of femininity. So the woke right is very pro-Islam and anti-Israel. Mainstream Republicans are anti-Islam and pro-Israel. So you can see that even on the right, you got a schism. The left is a little more unified with their base. They call them peaceful protesters. Earlier I said the central manipulator has the chosen one and the scapegoat, and how the scapegoat can do no right and the chosen one, the favored one, can do no wrong. So notice how when MAGA protests, it's the end of the world from the media's perspective. And how do they act when their side protests? and riots. They call it peaceful. I'm describing the structure of the metascript, the narratives that they plant, and the predictable reactions, and how it's fundamentally based on triangulating the factions. And this is consistent and has been since the beginning. Truman B says, Krispy Kreme, the same company that offered free donuts with proof of a Javi card, offered an ugly Artemis-inspired donut. Imagine my surprise. So we should be talking about this too. Artemis, the twin of Apollo and a goddess, being mentioned again and again. The Artemis mission. We got the full moon, pink moon. You got the obelisk worship, correlated with Easter weekend. Again, Ishtar, goddess. None of this is coincidental. I should probably look deeper into it. I want to remake Cult of the Obelisk and go over all these various, essentially, stories. I mean, what is history but a collection of stories? But these bigger stories, that like the story of humanity going to space is one, that deserves a separate conversation. Because there is an esoteric aspect to it. So we can look at the political psyops all day, and you can see engineered attitudes, micro-targeting with psyops. You can see the systemic fakery manipulating the masses in predictable ways. And that's very easy to understand as far as it being a matter of mass mind control. But then you find the other elements to it. The esoteric, the subtext. And that needs a separate body of research. I think that's a whole other area. But it exists. And my most recent, because like there's many theories on why this is done. My most recent thinking on it, however, is that what we're actually looking at here is the appropriation of all of the other religion, like, you know, the coexist bumper sticker, where every letter is a logo from a different religion. They're creating that for real. And so when I describe space as the new heaven, the one that supplants all the previous versions, a new iteration of an ancient concept, that's what I'm talking about. You can all fight over your local versions of what paradise looks like, as long as you agree on outer space. And that's one of the notions here, is a common point of agreement that everybody can fight over. I wonder if they can bring back space wars. There's kind of a space war going on right now, which is fighting over the definition of space. As far as it's a commons, are we going to go up there as Americans, as capitalists? Are we going to exploit other planets for their resources? Or are we going as environmentalists? And space environmentalism is already a thing. And there's a reason why space junk has been highlighted in recent years, and they point at Elon Musk because he's polluting space for profit, so he can put his satellites up there to pollute mines for profit. Cyberspace and outer space both being polluted by the richest man on Earth, who has too much influence. So this is an example of a fake person. Musk's role on the world stage is to serve as an example of why we can't sit back and passively allow unmitigated wealth to accumulate to any one individual. Like, the individual can destroy entire systems, entire commons. Space junk and mind junk from one person might be the end of all civilization. So we can't let this happen again. So Elon Musk is basically a walking, talking psyop, and one side sees him as a savior, the other side sees him as a destroyer. Well, who's right? They can't both be right. So, this is another common thing too. I said every single psyop is bifurcated. built along a dialectic. Every single fake character on the world stage is similarly split down the middle. How is it that Elon Musk is a villain and a savior? How is Bill Gates a villain and a savior? How is Trump the Antichrist and Christ, villain and savior? You can't be both. How is that? How is it even possible? Well, it's because these characters are designed that way to create the interaction between the two sides. It's perfectly polarized. It's never like, oh, I like this about him and not. It's like, no, you're either fully Trump deranged, frothing at the mouth, or you're praying to him and you have a Donald Trump edition Bible. There's no middle ground. There's no moderate Trump believer. There's basically fanatics and those who are convinced that he's the end of it all, that he must be stopped. I saw a license plate yesterday when I was driving around, and it said 18747. I took a picture of it. I should have noted the make and model. But anyway, I was thinking I should call the Secret Service, have that guy arrested or looked into. Because what does that mean? It's one thing to say 8647, like James Comey did, because 86 means you kick him out of the bar. 187 is a little more permanent. I know people who I won't name who have espoused the opinion that they had hoped that the shooter wouldn't have missed. I heard people I know say things like, where's Lee Harvey Oswald when you need him? Like, a lot of people I know are pro-assassination. And these are not just normies. These are like religious normies. So like, okay, religious normies who also believe in assassination or who cheer the deaths of right-wing conservative pundits, they lose the moral high ground for all time. If you ask me, like a person like that, a person who can make such a statement is, fundamentally, I think, how do you put it? Corrupted, hypocritical. Evil. I don't know. Like, I don't fantasize about people I don't know getting murdered because in some way it would benefit me. I'm actually opposed to murder. And then you see the left venerating, what's his name? Luigi Mangione. That was sick. Does the right do this? Does the right? Well, they kind of do. Right now, there's people on the right who are trying to get Derek Chauvin freed. So the fake events are very revealing. Lean Dion says, Marina Abramovich described Trump accurately. No middle ground, only polarizing so effectively. Yeah, she called him a great magician. And we have to remember, too, that Trump isn't Trump. The guy we know of as Trump is a construct. And like Erica Kirk, because, look, we can demonstrate Erica Kirk's entire character arc since September is followed and correlated directly with all the predictive programming with great specificity. So we can say she's a walking, talking crisis actor, a psyop. Basically, she's a person playing a role. The same can be said for Trump. The same can be said for Elon Musk. None of these people are independent or rogue. I know some people in our Discord server and others who, maintain that, well, Trump's bucking the system. He's not a politician. He's a businessman. I heard that so many times. Well, he's not a politician. He's a businessman. Yeah, I heard that talking point when he was first introduced. And it just struck me as naive. It's like Tucker Carlson. I'm not mainstream media. I'm a populist. Look at me. I'm fly fishing. I'm one of you. It's like, okay, well, the fact of it is, he exists and operates from a world in which all the fake events are real. And I would make the case here, I will actually, that the election of Donald Trump was basically performative voting, because he was always going to be. January 6th was always going to end the way it did. That there was no other version of it. Like, it wasn't like, oh, they could have stayed in power. They could have fought the deep. No, there was no victory there. That was a contrived spectacle that ended the way it was supposed to. Yeah, exactly, Lean Dion. He's just a businessman who loves America. Yeah, like, that's normal, because normal businessmen walking around get on Oprah when they're 33 and talk about becoming president in the future. Just a normal businessman with all kinds of cameos, friends with all kinds of celebrities. Yeah, nothing but a businessman. Like, the guy's been in show business his entire damn life. And he got the role as president. But the thing is, the role, the script, was written long before he entered politics. Now, I would argue this. The reason why, because Nicotrama says, I don't know why more people can't see this. The reason why they don't see it is they have a false sense of security in what they think they know. And it's a lack of information, and there have not been any effective challenges. That's why. There have been no effective challenges to what they think they know. Because the controlled dialectic is simply that, it's controlled. There's no real opposition. You have the mainstream media and the controlled opposition media, and they operate within these parameters that are never challenged. Anyone who does challenge them are fringed, or we're diluted with misinformation, where it's like, hey, I'm suggesting that Donald Trump is an actor, a psyop actor, participating in staged historic events because this is how we are governed globally. Like, to me, yeah, that's a big statement, but I can back it up. If someone comes along and says, I think Donald Trump is a clone, or possibly JFK Jr. in a Donald Trump suit, and he never actually existed because he's made of AI and CGI, but AI is ancient, not this new stuff, not ChatGPT, but ancient. The instant I hear that stuff, I'm like, okay, you're crazy. You decided that instead of going for the most reasonable explanation, you threw out your Occam's razor and you said, let me find the most outlandish, word salad-y conspiracy theory I can, and let me run with that. And the reason why they do that is pretty simple. It's because they're operating within the mainstream mediation circle, that set of parameters, and they're seeing inconsistencies. So the only way to explain the inconsistencies is to use conspiracy theories. I'm not doing conspiracy theories. Conspiracy theories are used to fill in the gaps, to augment what is not satisfactory. Conspiracy theories are used to lend plausibility to impossible things. Like, well, I just don't see how these planes could have melted the building, so maybe it was a direct energy weapon from space. Oh, it's a tactical nuke. You see what I mean? Where the truthers are starting off with the faulty premise, and so the only way they can make it make sense is to add a bunch of stuff. You know, like liars caught in a lie. Like, for example, I knew someone whose husband was a gambling addict, and he gambled away his paycheck. And the way he explained it was he was mugged. And he had this elaborate story about how he did gamble, but he didn't lose all his money, but he lost in the parking lot. He just added and added and added. It's like you add lies on top of lies. It doesn't make it any truer. And what truthers are doing, essentially, is that they are starting off with a lie that they don't know is a lie because it was presented visually, and then they're trying to explain it with stories, narratives, aka lies. Joe from Connecticut says at WWE WrestleMania, Jesse Ventura, WrestleMania 20, Ventura told Trump, "I think it's time for a wrestler to enter the White House." Everyone thought he was talking about himself, but he was hinting about Trump. Well, he recently said that Trump bladed his ear, which isn't likely. I mean, it looked like it, but I think it's more likely that he got some ketchup or some theatrical blood applied to his face while he was beneath the podium. I think that's far more likely than he actually cut himself. But he brought that up on Piers Morgan. And again, I think this is interesting how all of a sudden a lot of people are talking about fake Kirk, fake Trump shootings. And yet their explanations don't leave the world stage. Their point of views screw it up. So this is a great example of what I'm describing here. How if your point of view is MSM plus, you can just add a bunch of lies on top of the lie. There's no truth in it. It's an edifice of lies. So when I say off-world stage position or perspective, I'm saying a perspective that doesn't stand upon the world stage. And what is the world stage? The world stage is real plus all of the augmentations. So if you're not standing upon their foundation of lies, then you would be from the off-world stage perspective. But we have been looking at this long enough and not just looking at the daily stuff and reacting like a bunch of sheep. You know, we're not being programmed. That's when I say programmed, I'm talking about people who are adhering to the program as it rolls out every day. We aren't. But when we're looking at this, our perspective is inclusive of decades of fakery. It's systemic. So you have to think bigger. Systemic fakery. Lean Dion says he's getting too old for blading. The serpent tongue spread applied on the floor. Yeah, also blading was done at the top of the head or on the forehead where the skin is very thin, minimal scarring, and it would mix with the wrestler's sweat. So it would be a reddening, it'd be red dripping down the whole face. That was what blading actually constituted. Nipping the ear like that, I don't think so. JRG says the normies on the right are waiting for his 6D chess moves. Yeah, I remember that. I would say to my Q friends, hey, you know, Trump's just going along with all these PSYOP narratives like they're real. And they'd say, just eat your popcorn, bro. This is 5D chess. He knows that we know, but he can't show it because they'll use the Amendment 25 to kick him out of office if he speaks the truth. So he's going to hint at us through his tweets that are timed to coordinate with Q drops. So he knows that we know the truth, but the awakening's not for everybody. And they've already executed Barack and Hillary and Bill Gates and Jerry Seinfeld and Tom Hanks. I'm like, what? Yeah, they took them all to Guantanamo and JFK Jr. executed them. But they replaced them with clones and people wearing masks because they don't want to upset anybody yet. So their story for the longest time was that the deep state was being killed. And whenever a celebrity got vaxxed, it was actually a disclosure from Trump that they had been executed. So the QAnoners were sitting there imagining all these executions happening. But in order to explain the cognitive dissonance of the executed people never going away, they would say, oh, they just replaced them. Like that makes any sense. But anyway, 6D chess. So what does that mean? Well, when you're dealing with Stockholm Syndrome or people who are in toxic situations, they will often lie to defend their controller. And so they are being lied to by their cult leader. But rather than recognize they've been deceived and betrayed and that they're being lied to, it's easier for them to say, oh, he wouldn't lie to us. He's lying to everybody else. But he's secretly telling us. That's why he drew the Q in the air. I mean, I spelled copium with a Q. It was so bad. And none of those people have come out of the woodworks to apologize. I know a lot of people who fell into the whole Q thing who basically left the IPS think tank over it. One of them in particular was like, you need to stop saying that Trump's just an actor. Don't you want to save the children? Trump's saving the children. Don't you want to save the children? I'm like, oh, yeah, give me the AIDS ribbon. I'll wear it. I don't want the beat down. Of course I want to save the children. But there was some legitimate pressure put on me to basically shut up. And that's not the first time. So I've been very careful about, like, the reason why I shut my DMs to most, for the most part, because I used to be very open to like side conversations. I really stopped that. I decided I need to keep everything transparent. And I stopped that a few years ago because I noticed that the people who got close to me oftentimes were questionable and seemed to have an agenda that whenever I would veer to certain territories, they would jump in my ear and try to shut me up. Dearth, formerly Dearth, now Fed, Flat Earth Dave, was one of the first ones where publicly he didn't acknowledge knowing me. But we spoke all the time on Skype, and he would lecture me after live streams. He'd be like, you keep saying that nobody died on 9/11, but my best friend was a 9/11 jumper. And my other best friend, my buddy, was an EMT who has PTSD from dodging 9/11 jumpers. So whenever you say that, it hurts their feelings. And then I had another one. He's like, look, I got these friends who are listening to you because I brought them in, and they're just, they're Christians, and could you just not bash religion? I'm not bashing it. I'm criticizing it. There's a difference. But I had a number of people who just seemed to be in position to mitigate this discussion, like plants. So I'm not accusing any individuals here, although I'm pretty sure that the ones that were deeply connected to the Q movement were in fact planted by whoever puts these psyops together. They have their departments. I do think they've put influencers in the circle. Anonymous says, Dirt Dave is an obvious shill, gatekeeping, fake flat earther. Oh yeah, I have a lot of Mr. He thought she was 18 because she lied. That was his defense of that predator. Oh, terrible. Anyway. Yeah, Joe from Connecticut says, I had to stop listening to Q once they started talking about hidden alien technology that will help us teleport instead of having to use cars. Yeah, I knew a QAnoner who was taking malaria medicine, and he was convinced of, quote, med beds. Med beds. These things would be rolled out that would cure all diseases and make you basically immortal. These people were rolled out, all these operatives and agents, and looking back, it's very clear now that they were all just simply that. Flat Earth Dave is also a, how do you put it, intellectual property thief. He had this app someone else made. He beta tested it. They didn't have the working capital to start it up. So what did he do? He just started the app himself, and he cut the other guy out of it. And then the app is basically hackable, where he released the locations of every single person who went on the Flat Earth People Finder app. So if you want to know where all the flat earthers live, this is the app. I think they try to make it into a dating app as well for flat earthers, which is so sick. And he was making I don't know, based on the number of ratings, probably $100,000 a year off this thing, if not more. So it was doing very well. But the point of it is, it was stolen intellectual property. Like, to me, that's pretty low. Holly Goering says, JFK Jr. didn't come back because we didn't believe hard enough. Let us pray for the children. Shut up, you God blockers. You know, I had this conversation with someone about this once. When Q started and the awakening started, there was this very questionable individual, probably a nonce. I think that's what they call them in the UK. And I was like, at the time, I had these people in my Discord. We had 500 people in Discord. It was big. And one of the persons in there was like getting on our live chats, and he would say, hey, I just want to add in here. I know you're talking about the Vegas event and you're saying it's fake, but I just want to give my heart out and give my thoughts and my prayers out to the survivors. And I was like, who is this? Why would you? Anyway, this person and others were part of Q. And I said, you know, you can't trust Q. It's an anonymous source. It's probably Hillary Clinton. Like, it's probably a psyop. I said that when it started. And half of the server left. Half of them said, we're going down Q Street. It's a one-way trip. And they all left. So I specifically remember watching the Q movement essentially take a lot of people out of media fakery analysis and into politics. Anyway, this one person I'm referring to, he said to me, don't you want there to be a great awakening? And he said, because we have to collectively manifest it. We have to maintain positive thinking. Where I was basically told that, yeah, your negative thinking is going to prevent us from activating, I think they called it fifth dimension, where they were basically talking about the ascension of consciousness once we all vibe at the right level. And I wasn't vibing. No, I'm not vibing with this JFK Jr. as third coming of Christ and JFK coming back and aliens and med beds and free money. Not to mention all the crypto scams. I didn't fall for it, but I watched it, and it was a great example of a government-run psychological operation that fused religion and politics in a really significant way. And we have a very close view of this. So for people who don't know, we doxed Q. And I say that, and people are just like, oh, there's no such thing as Q. It's like, what do you mean? You think those Q, and one person tried to say, oh, it's AI. Q's AI and it's time traveling. It's a time traveling artificial intelligence. I'm like, no, I've identified by the username on 8chan, the person who's actually posting the Q drops. And we identified this person, and the story's gone largely ignored. And I think it's because they don't want to know, or it's protected. The person's a protected asset. The HBO documentary didn't figure it out. Imagine doing a documentary to expose who Q is and not finding out. You think that this would be of significant interest to people. The reason why it's not is that the Q person wasn't supposed to be doxxed. This is somebody who was working out of the White House with Pete Navarro and Garrett Ziegler. And now their main thing is the Hunter Biden laptop, if that's still a thing anymore. But we identified this person, and they're right now working in the White House press corps as a major provocateur and influencer who got a gold key to the White House issued by Donald Trump. He had lapel pins from Mike Pence. I mean, this person was is friends with Ivanka and Don Jr., Alex Jones, Joe Rogan, and a whole slew of of mixed martial arts fighters like Eddie Bravo. But anyway, I have the receipts, I have the evidence. I actually did a FOIA request at the FBI to get all of my reports and everything I submitted over the years, and I have it all in a nice CD because I am still involved in litigation over this issue, and the truth will get out. The person has too big of a footprint to ever escape this. But I think it's a big story that has just been kind of sleeping. but it's going to eventually erupt. I have not forgotten. But my point of it is, we learned early on that the whole Q movement was manufactured, and we watched it from here, from this perspective, people falling for it. It's masterful. The mind control system here is sophisticated. I mean, I understand why people fall for it. I take credit for having destroyed the Mandela effect cult. I mean, it's still a conspiracy theory. Like if you're a TikToker and that stuff blows your mind, yeah, it's still a thing. You know, it's like, oh, Smokey Bear is not Smokey the Bear. Mind blown. Reality must have shifted. They must have cranked up CERN because that changed. You know, people are having their memories messed with. That's normal. The misinformation effect has been a very consistent thing. But there was a cult being formed around it until we effectively debunked the entire concept. JRG says the Wiener Hunter laptops. Yeah, the laptops have been replaced by the Epstein files, and they all lead to nowhere. You notice the pattern? You got the Q drops that exposed the deep state. What happened to that? Nothing. Hunter Biden's laptop, nothing. Anthony Weiner's laptop, nothing. Epstein files, nothing. X322 says Brian Stavely used to threaten violence over the IPS debunk. Yeah, he did say he was going to punch me in the face. He did get violent. But that's because I killed his God. You know, and it sounds mean, but I think I did him a favor. I did him a huge favor. In fact, he should thank me now for his present day career as a relatively successful real estate agent. Because he was losing himself, I think. Like he was, I think, legitimately losing his mind. His organs were rearranging. His skull was changing. And he could not figure out what was real and fake. And now he's, you know, he's probably, I mean, the thing is, the Mandela effect believe that if you don't believe in it, you're an NPC. That only the special people get the downloads. He thought I was his enemy because what he and his best buddy had come up with, and that this is what their big cult following was about, is that if you're picking up on Mandela effects, it means you're tuning in. And so they saw themselves as a breakaway civilization, and that what they were doing is incrementally transcending the matrix. Mandela effect by Mandela effect, each one representing a step towards total emancipation from the matrix and all of its control systems. Not only that, but it constituted a form of physical transmutation with their bodies changing. So I think he imagined that at some point, you know, they would all be what they call gigachads with 6 digits and Bugattis and living the life of their dreams or something. Like they saw themselves as reaching a path to transcendence and mastery over the world. And so I come along and I'm like, oh, that's fake. And one of their main leaders, I don't want to say his name because he cried. He was like, some of us hate this world. Some of us are suffering and we're in pain. And what you have done by destroying our belief is you have blocked our path. You are the God blocker. What's up, JR Sonic 58? Here is your wrench. So I basically blocked their access to ascension. I blocked them on their path to paradise. How cruel. I kept them trapped here in the matrix. I'm like an archon. Like, you're not getting out of this matrix. I'm your Agent Smith. Go work a normie job. Stop shifting realities. Go with the consensus And so it's like, in a way, I wonder if he ever has doubts. Like, does he ever wake up in the middle of the night? Like, he's got a nice house. He's got a Bugatti. He's selling real estate out there in Centerville. He's like 3 years free of the Mandela effect thing. YouTube's in the past, but does he ever like wake up and think, did I sell out to the Matrix? Did I take the blue pill? Did I get ciphered? Did I choose comfort over transcendence? Did that God blocker knock me off my path? Like, in a way, I'm kind of his Satan. And maybe he realizes it. No, but the truth of it is I'm actually his savior. Because one of the issues here is that your greatest resource is your time, your bandwidth. How many F's do you have to give every day? Don't be a loosh cow. You have to control your own mind, or someone else will. And if your mind is being hijacked by a mind virus or a belief system that doesn't actually serve you, why not get rid of it? So in a way, I'm sort of a freelance cult deprogrammer. I'm a cult deprogrammer without borders. Like those doctors without borders who travel the world and, just basically donate their services. Like, I'm kind of, in that sense, a deprogrammer. And I said before that most people don't know that they're confused if they're living in the world stage because it's built on confusion. The programmers are subtle, and they have a complete monopoly over this echo chamber. And the programmed have no idea they're programmed. In fact, they're also encouraged to be very certain, so much that it's hubris and it's arrogance, where they can't even conceptualize that they might be programmed. And that's why I've been working so much on these infographics and these whiteboards, because I think that to conceptualize the invisible prison, many people are going to need graphics. That's what I do. I map these things out, these concepts. And what I've come to conclude here as my basic, like, when we talk about models, the model of the world, as I explain it, is simple. It's a circle, a closed system of information, the news cycle. And the news cycles are stacked. Like, think of a stack of quarters. Like, every news cycle accumulates, and we have history. So our history of news cycles is actually a history of psyop, warped, distorted news. So the world stage is that collection of fake historical events superimposed over what we actually experience. And within it, it is built around the political horseshoe and a central triangulator antagonizing the two sides against one another. That's your world stage. And the conspiracy theorists exist within a subset of that big circle. So you have the big circle, and then you have a circle within it on the right side. That circle within, the compartment within the big container, that's your Trutherville. Those are your conspiracy theories. So the conspiracy theories can't set you free, and none of the rabbit trails lead you to the edge. They actually lead you in circles. Exploring says, did you see the dancing sailors in the Strait of Hormuz? I have not. I was too busy watching a really terrible movie. And, I want to, again, why is it that in Project Hail Mary, the alien looked like a spider? And in Adam Sandler's movie from a couple years ago, Spaceman, it looked like a spider. What is the alien spider connection? Does anybody have an idea? And I saw the Spider-Man trailer right before, and then his spacesuit is red. And then he's bouncing around in space using a cord, kind of like Spider-Man. So I don't know. I don't think I'm reading too much into it. There's something in the symbolism here that needs to be unraveled. So if you have any comments on that, leave it below. We're approaching the hour 3. But yeah, the weird occult thing with spiders. Yeah, exactly. Now, David Bowie, Man Who Fell to Earth, a lot of interesting stuff there. Space Oddity, Space Odyssey. Didn't he have spiders from Mars? What was that? I'll have to look into it because you mentioned music. And oh yeah, that's right. Pennywise was a spider-like alien. Yeah, there must be something there. But yeah, we do need to look at predictive programming in books, video games, music, as well as the movies. Because people can dismiss a single example as anecdotal or just selective noticing. But what we're revealing here is the pattern, the reflexivity that George Soros wrote about in that social alchemy piece. We're looking at concerted messaging that comes from so many different sources with such precision in timing and consistency in messaging that it would really stretch. It'd really be a reach to say that this was uncoordinated. Lean Dion says, weaving spiders come not here is apparently from a Greek myth where a woman wove better than a goddess and was turned into a spider or something. Oh, interesting. Weaving spiders come not here. That's from Shakespeare. No. It's from the Bohemian Grove has it outside. The Shakespeare quote was the one about the tangled web we weave when we set out to deceive. But yeah, there's some interesting spidery stuff in there. But I thought I'd point it out because it wasn't humanoid at all. It didn't even have a discernible face. And yet, I mean, it had a discernible orifice of some kind, but they certainly fell in love. And they were hugging and sleeping. It was just, like I said, if you haven't seen Project Hail Mary, I don't know how to describe it other than cartoony and kind of goofy. But, you know, that's, like, it's so unserious. But again, it's just a huge juxtaposition. Comedic, unserious, alien, loving alien, friendship, buddy, lots of cute scenes and they fall in love versus aliens as demons, aliens hijacking minds, aliens destroying us. It's just fascinating how we have these two versions of the alien. Aliens as a threat, aliens as a presence to be embraced. All right, well, we'll be in contact. I'm working on a few projects. I want to say thanks to all the supporters of the channel. This is the start of what will be the most important phase of the think tank since its inception. And this is the phase where the off-world stage commences the invasion of the world stage. And we've been preparing for this for a long time. You realize that since the Autohoaxology 101 came out, this has been the plan. And we have been working towards this, and we've only solidified our foundations even more. Meanwhile, the opposition has only become increasingly confused and brainwashed and really just complacent. They don't stand a chance. The guardrails don't stand a chance. And so it's really going to be interesting to see how this plays out, you know, who defects and who takes our position. Because I'm not telling people what to think or what to believe or even to join our think tank necessarily. I'm advocating for a more general apostasy. And then, of course, content creators creating from that perspective. We're talking about a counterculture. Because alternative media is a fake counterculture. Yeah, Ribo Nation, good call. E.T. versus Independence Day. That's a great way of putting it. Go to ips.monster if you want to see what we're working on. I'm going to put an update there soon. And I need to put more time and effort into getting my archives uploaded. I'll see if I can work out a system. I'm trying to figure out the best way to make that happen. But I think the simplest thing is just to wait. I mean, I'm a week away from my real first payday. And my plan is, and I've been looking at places, is to jump into an office, set up the computers, turn on the phones, and then have a scheduled time. Like basically it'll be after work, so it's predictable, at a very certain time every morning or evening, however it works out. But we're going to do a late night open phones. I'll have to work it out. I don't expect there to be a conflict as far as getting this scheduling down. It looks like it's going to be stable into the future. If anything, they're going to cut my hours. There was a shortage, and I took a lot of overtime, and I'm not supposed to without it being approved in advance. But because of the shortage, they didn't really have a choice. So I kind of took advantage of the situation, but it's not going to last forever. All right, thanks for your time, and we will be following with the Artemis mission. And interspecies human spider hybrids are kind of a theme as well to look into, because that's what's insinuated in the movie. Hybrids. And I'm noticing people talking about hybrids already among us.